Alright, everyone, if you need to use the restroom, make sure to let this janitor know. He chuckled, patting me on the shoulder. I could tell that everyone around us was probably remembering our school days, and not in a good way. After a round of laughter, they all began to ignore me again, pretending I wasn't there. This reunion was held at a large bar that had been rented out, with each seat meticulously assigned. The moment I found out he was in charge of planning, I had a bad feeling, and I was right. My seat was set apart from everyone else, right in front of the restroom. As he walked away, he leaned in and whispered in my ear, "A prime seat for someone broke like you, huh? Go ahead, enjoy yourself." Stifling a smirk, he moved off to rejoin the lively crowd. As he left, a woman approached me. And with her first words, I suddenly became the center of attention, but for a very different reason. "Shall I reveal your true identity? My name is Daniel Owens. I'm here tonight for a high school reunion after several years. There were definitely people I wasn't thrilled to see, but I came to expand my network a bit. Still, I didn't expect to be harassed the way I used to be back in school." As soon as I walked in, the reunion organizer cheerfully came up to me, acting like we were old friends. He pulled me toward the back of the venue. "Wow, went all out with that outfit, huh? Got enough cash to cover your part, right? I guess poor folks need to make the most of meals like these. Ha!" He threw digs at me the whole way, finally dumping me at a seat marked with a scribbled name tag. A far cry from the neat cards everyone else had. It was the kind of spot that wouldn't really matter if it stayed empty. It was right in front of the restroom, where other customers would probably go. I ended up spending my time alone, away from everyone, at a seat by the restroom. The one who probably arranged it all was Tony, our classmate and the organizer. He'd always mocked me for being poor, and now, here I was, sitting by myself in the least desirable spot. I didn't really want to see him, but he was the organizer, so I couldn't avoid it. Just when I was wondering what to do next, a woman came over to me holding a glass and a bottle of beer. I thought she was headed to the restroom, but her eyes were locked on me. She took a seat next to me, poured beer into my empty glass, and spoke up. "Long time no see, Daniel." Yeah, it's been a while." Her face felt vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place this stunning woman whom everyone would likely be turning to look at. Noticing my hesitation, she playfully punched me in the stomach. Suddenly, vivid memories rushed back. "Emma. Wait, no way. Took you long enough? Ha ha." I clutched my stomach a bit, chuckling despite myself. Back in high school, Emma and I had a bit of a connection. She was beautiful then, but she didn't wear makeup and had a short haircut. So I didn't recognize the sophisticated woman with long hair sitting beside me right away. I arrived a bit late, you know. Honestly, Tony's knack for being snarky hasn't changed a bit. Well, it's been so long since I last saw him, maybe he's just feeling like he's back in high school. "Daniel, you're still too kind," Emma mumbled, and just then, someone called her over from across the room. I smiled, signaling she should go ahead. But to my surprise, she raised her voice and said something totally unexpected. "Hey, everyone, come over here. Let's hear Daniel, our CEO, share his secrets to success." What? Like everyone else, I reacted out loud, caught off guard. Since popular Emma had said it, people started gathering around my seat by the restroom. Emma, smiling brightly, patted me on the back and began talking to everyone as if it were her own story. "You all know that cleaning company making waves with all those commercials lately, right? Well, Daniel here is the CEO." For a moment, time felt frozen. Then, the room erupted in chatter. I hadn't exactly been hiding it, and Emma was right. Right now, I'm the CEO of a company primarily focused on cleaning services. I even had to ask my assistant to clear my schedule so I could be here tonight. "Daniel, are you serious? I work at a hotel, and your company handles our cleaning." I've got a friend in event planning who uses your services, too. So, what's your annual salary? Well, I don't usually share that, but our revenue's around $2 million. As I casually said it, the room went silent before bursting into cheers and questions. It wasn't a secret, but it was certainly enough to get the reunion buzzing. We started exchanging business cards and reminiscing, and it finally felt like a real reunion. But then, a loud voice broke through the excitement. Are you all really crowding around by the restroom? It's time to get ready for the after party. And the janitor CEO here doesn't need to come. Right? Tony approached, looking down at everyone and me with a smug expression. Oh, right. I actually have to get back to work. Hey! Go ahead and polish things up real nice. Alright, everyone, let's hit karaoke. Snorting with contempt, Tony led the group out. Just as I was about to leave the place a bit later. I thought I was the only one left, but suddenly, someone grabbed my arm. Startled, I turned around to find Emma standing there. The two of us walked out of the restaurant, heading toward the station opposite where everyone else had gone. Aren't you going to the after party? Everyone will miss you if you're not there. It's fine. Wasn't really in the mood anyway. Besides, Daniel, you're amazing. I probably sounded like I was bragging, but I just wanted everyone to know how hard you've worked. Emma, her cheeks slightly flushed from the drinks, looked at me with a warm smile. Seeing that smile brought back memories of feelings I'd never expressed to her. Emma. I stopped, looking straight into her smiling face. The only reason I managed to work so hard, even back in high school, was because of you. Thank you for everything. Finally getting the words out brought back a flood of memories. In my junior year, my life changed overnight. We found out that a family friend who'd borrowed money from my father had disappeared, and our finances spiraled out of control. My father was known for being too kind. Since the acquaintance was also an old friend, the news spread quickly. Without resentment, my father threw himself into work, barely sleeping, until he collapsed. Both my parents wanted me to go to college, but I chose a path where I could start earning quickly. At school, I was treated like an outcast. Then, I became Tony's favorite target. So that's how poor people are made, huh? When I get to college, maybe I'll write a paper on the Owens family. Call it The Downfall of Kindness, maybe? He'd make comments like that daily, but I never said a word back. Part of me might have even believed he wasn't entirely wrong. But things got worse once I started working part-time jobs. At that time, job openings were scarce, and the only place that agreed to hire me, with no experience or qualifications, was a small, local cleaning company. They handled cleaning public restrooms in parks and office buildings. For Tony, my job was just more ammunition for his constant taunts. Hey, Daniel, off to clean park toilets again today? What a bottom-rung life. Let's all make a mess for Daniel to clean up, shall we? His mockery was no longer hidden. He ridiculed me openly in the classroom. One day, I arrived to find a bucket full of filthy rags dumped on my desk. Someone must have spilled milk in there yesterday, it reeked. But that wasn't all. At some point, the classroom trash can had been moved next to my seat at the very back. Tony threw his half-finished juice box in with a smirk, loudly calling out to me. Hey, Mr. Janitor, shouldn't you keep this trash from piling up? Cleaning's your thing, right? By the way, the bathroom looked a little dirty earlier. So you might want to check it out. Bathroom cleaning's your specialty, isn't it? I just sat there in silence, refusing to look his way. I started to wonder if there was any point in coming to school, or even graduating. That's when a voice suddenly broke through my darkening thoughts. So, if cleaning toilets is bottom rung, then what about your mom who cleans the toilet at home? Guess that makes you bottom rung too, huh? What did you just say? It was Emma, with her short hair and sun-kissed skin, standing up for me, glaring at Tony. And what's this let's all make a mess nonsense? That's against the law, you know? Wow, dealing with people like you really is a waste of time. Come on, Daniel, let's go. Ha! What? Ignoring Tony's shouts, Emma grabbed my hand, and with a mix of anger and laughter, dragged me down the hallway. While I was still trying to figure out why she was defending me, we ended up on the rooftop. Emma, why did you? Why? Because I couldn't talk to you otherwise. What? I was honestly confused by her reasoning. But Emma just smiled and kept talking. Daniel, are you planning to keep working in cleaning after graduation? I don't know. I'm just focused on making money right now. Well, sometimes not having it all figured out is okay, too. What? Lying on the rooftop, Emma stared up at the sky. Every so often, a breeze would blow, making her skirt flutter, and I had to look away awkwardly. When I turned my face away, Emma suddenly stood up and came right toward me. Then, she punched me hard in the stomach. Ow. What the heck? Honestly, Daniel, you're way too nice. Fine, I'll protect you until graduation. I'm sure there's a path to happiness out there for you. What makes you so sure? As I spat out those words, rubbing my stomach, Emma once again took up a punching stance directed at me. All right. I'll be in your care. Upon hearing those words, Emma smiled and headed down the stairs. I had thought I just needed to wait for time to pass, but suddenly, I found myself in an unexpected situation. Back then, I assumed Emma's kindness was just a passing whim. But from that day on, Emma started talking to me more and more. She made sure Tony couldn't get near me. Spending time with her gradually became comfortable for me. But before I knew it, graduation day had arrived. In the end, I decided to continue working in the cleaning industry. Emma was leaving town to study business management. On our last day at school, she held my hand, not looking at me as she said, Daniel, your kindness will definitely lead you to happiness. Those were the last words we exchanged. I had spent years pondering Emma's words. After all, my family had ended up in debt because of my father's kindness. But I wanted to believe in what Emma had said. Looking back, my life had felt like it was guided by Emma's encouragement from that day onward. I worked hard, no matter what. In every place, I put in my best effort with care. At places I visited regularly, people started to express their gratitude more and more. Then, as I was approaching my first year on the job, I was unexpectedly summoned by Mr. Stewart. My heart leapt, hoping it was about a full-time position, but what he told me was the complete opposite. I had been let go. Mr. Stewart, but why? Daniel, I always assign the toughest jobs to new hires. In this line of work, having the right attitude is key, and you handled it, even as a student. I never told you, but we've received so much praise for you from various places. You've done a great job, Daniel. Mr. Stewart sniffled slightly and set an envelope with documents on the table. It's a company run by an old friend of mine. You've probably heard the name. There's also a letter of recommendation from me in there. If you want to keep going in this field, work on your skills there and aim even higher. Your compassion for others is your greatest strength. As he spoke, Emma's words suddenly echoed in my mind. With Mr. Stewart's support, I joined a major company, learned a great deal, and eventually went independent. A breakthrough came when a cleaning product I had been researching received a patent. Even after going solo, my approach to work didn't change. The words of Mr. Stewart and Emma remained my driving force. To this day, I still connect with Mr. Stewart through work, but I've always wanted to thank Emma as well. And tonight, I'd finally done that. As I drifted into these memories, I noticed Emma looking at me with a puzzled expression, as if trying to piece things together. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, she stepped closer and said with a soft smile, "So, you're happy now, right?" "Yes." "Thank you." We shared a quiet smile before continuing our walk. Since that reunion, Emma and I had started keeping in touch. Most of our conversations were lighthearted, but they became a comforting break amid my busy work schedule. Finally, we found time to meet up. Maybe I was a bit too excited for my age. I hurried to finish my work and headed to the restaurant where we were meeting. Even though I knew it was just a casual meal with a former classmate, my heart was racing as I waited for Emma. I heard the waiter announce her arrival, followed by the soft sound of heels and a faint, floral scent. "Sorry to keep you waiting. It's been about a month, huh, Daniel?" I found myself momentarily speechless, admiring how she dressed up even more than at the reunion. Seeing her usual smile finally snapped me back to reality. The conversation over the meal was, as expected, about trivial things. In the relaxed atmosphere and the unique feeling that only in-person interaction can bring, I felt a sense of happiness. Still, something seemed a bit off. As we neared the dessert, I finally gathered the courage to ask Emma, "You seem a little tired. Has work been busy?" "Oh, well." Emma looked slightly embarrassed before giving a small, resigned smile. "Daniel, I knew you'd notice. There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." "What is it?" "It's about whether or not to take over the family business. I've never doubted it before, but now, suddenly, I'm not so sure." Emma's life had always been so different from mine. Emma's family runs a long-established Japanese confectionery shop that has been in business since the Taisho era. It's a shop that values tradition, having operated with only one type of dumpling since the beginning. Above all, they cherish passing it down through the family. In contrast to my chaotic life, Emma had always followed a clear, predetermined path. Her life was one where everything was already decided. As an adult, I finally understood the words she'd said on that rooftop long ago. Her remark, "It's hard both to make decisions and to have them made for you," hinted that she had likely felt a sense of discomfort about a life without choices. Even back then. And now, she was openly questioning it. I didn't know the answer, but I felt a strong urge to support the person who had always been there for me. While I was deep in thought, she suddenly spoke up. "So, would it be possible for me to work at your company, even just for a little while? Maybe as an intern or something like that?" "What?" "I mean, I'd like to see what it's like out there in the world." "But, it's probably not possible, right? I mean, it's such a big company. And just because we're classmates." Though I was surprised, I quickly realized this could be exactly what I could do for her. "I know a bit about your family's business. I don't know if it will change anything. But experiencing a completely different job might help you see things more clearly. We'd be happy to have you on board." "Really?" No sooner had she spoken, Emma was already gripping my hands firmly. Then, with a slightly trembling voice, she said, "I know it seems selfish, given that I was born into that family, but I really want to see your world, Daniel." While calming her down, things fell into place surprisingly quickly. We explained it to her family as an opportunity to gain hands-on business experience. Perhaps the fact that I was an old classmate helped smooth things over. And so, Emma began working at my company as an intern, specifically as my assistant. I hoped it would be a way for me to support her, but I never anticipated that I'd be pulling her into the unpredictable side of life. The following Monday, Emma started working at our office. I had her shadow our lead assistant and make the rounds of our departments, and I heard the entire office would stir every time she walked in. With her neatly tied black hair and effortlessly stylish suit, she quickly earned the nickname Beauty Secretary. She didn't seem to mind, so I let it slide. But it wasn't just her appearance. Emma was a highly capable assistant. As the heir to her family's business, she'd probably learned a lot already. She picked things up quickly and handled unexpected situations with ease. Soon enough, she was taking on almost all of the basic tasks by herself. "I think I really enjoy this work," she said with her usual smile. "Thinking about how to make things easier for others, or rather, for you, Mr. Owens, is surprisingly fun for me. Being called Mr. Owens with that usual smile always felt a bit awkward. But for someone as quick-witted as Emma, it was likely a perfect fit. She even proposed ways to improve efficiency in the assistant department and eagerly sought input whenever she had new ideas. Consider my position a little here, would you, Mr. Owens? Ha! It was after Emma had gone home. The one who said that to me was Kent Irwin, my executive assistant who had been with me since the early days of my business. With his lean, muscular build and piercing gaze, he carries himself with even more authority than I do. And, of course, he knows the company inside and out. Consideration? You mean Emma's being talked about behind her back? Not just behind her back anymore. Some call her arrogant, a nepotism hire, all looks. Emma's not here through nepotism, it's an internship. And she's only sharing her insights. What's wrong with that? Well, given that you brought her here, it's nepotism to them. Kent's straightforward comment left me speechless. Just when she'd finally stepped into a new world, this was happening. I felt helpless. Seeing me slump at the meeting table, Kent sighed. Why an assistant, anyway? I've been handling everything on my own just fine. If it's an internship, she could have been assigned to one of the field teams. Personal considerations should be kept in check. Sorry. Kenny. Just because we go way back doesn't mean you should call me that. Even with his stern warning, I kept wondering what to do next. Emma might need to be moved to a different role. But I didn't want to take away the sense of fulfillment she'd found in her work as an assistant. As I sat there, unable to reach a conclusion, Kent forcefully pulled me up from my chair. His gaze was sharper than usual as he looked directly at me. It's Emma, right? That girl from high school you've always said you're so grateful for? Yeah. Kent released me with an exaggerated sigh before continuing. She's aware of the resentment toward her, you know. And she's still determined to keep going. What are you planning to do about it? That was one question I'd always known the answer to. Protect her. This time, I promised myself I'd protect her. Hearing that, Kent gave a small smile and left the room. Thanks, Kenny. As long as Emma could work here with a smile, I would protect this place. No, I would create a place where she could keep smiling. That day, I silently renewed my commitment. One day, shortly after the workday had begun, I was about to start my tasks in the executive office as usual when I noticed some commotion outside. I was about to step out to see what was going on when Kent, who usually arrived before me, finally showed up. But after only a brief exchange, he hurried off toward the assistant department. In a few short words, Kent had informed me that a major error had occurred at the company level. Since we handle a wide range of cleaning services, multiple projects are always running simultaneously. Occasionally, the assistant department is called on to help coordinate. And this time, the mistake had happened there. Emma had been in charge. I'm truly sorry. I could hear Emma's loud apology in the assistant department's office, along with the whispers of other employees outside. The job in question was a cleanup following a large outdoor festival. Though the task had been handed down from another department, it was a substantial project for Emma to handle on her own. Somehow, amidst the handoff from one department to another, preparations had stalled. The staff in charge of event cleanup had even come to the assistant department, standing beside Kent with his head in his hands. Emma kept apologizing to Kent, her manager, and the employee involved. Kent silently guided her out of the office. With a pale face, Emma was led to my office. Mr. Owens, I've brought her here. Ah, Kent. I've already got everything organized. I'll head to the site myself this evening. Emma stood frozen, looking as if she had no idea what was going on. Then, she tried her best to part her trembling lips. Mr. Owens. Emma, this was a company mistake, not yours alone. As soon as I'd learned of the error, I'd acted immediately. I'd coordinated with previous staffing agencies and short-term hiring apps to pull together a team, rearranged the original staff schedules, and set everything in motion. It's in times like these that I really appreciate your character. Standing beside Kent, Emma looked relieved as tears began to spill down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. Emma. Thank you. Thank you so much. After all, I am the CEO. After Kent quietly left the office, I handed Emma a handkerchief to dry her tears. She asked to help at the job site, and no one worked more earnestly that day than she did. After seeing off all the staff who'd come on short notice, Emma and I waited in the now dark square for Kent to pick us up. Just as I was about to thank her for her hard work, she spoke up first. Daniel, thank you so much. This is part of my job, so I'll always be here. I'm going back home to my family. What? It took me a moment to process what she meant. It meant Emma had decided to take over her family's business. If that was her choice, I had no right to stop her. But I didn't know how to express the feelings that were swelling in my chest. Before I knew it, I muttered softly, "Did I fail to be there for you?" Emma quickly turned to face me. I could see her tears, glistening even in the dim light. That's not true. I'm so grateful for you, Daniel. You listened to my selfish dreams and showed me a new world. You made me realize that it's not just about having the strength to keep the family business afloat. You taught me how challenging yet rewarding it is to truly engage with work. Emma gave me a small, gentle smile and said one last thing. I wanted to stay here. But I can't burden you any longer. I've left my resignation letter on your desk. I had such an amazing time, really. Thank you. Emma. Without looking back, Emma walked away from me. There was no way I'd find an answer by thinking about it. I wanted to talk to her more. When I got back to the office, I took Emma's resignation letter from her desk and quietly tucked it deep into my drawer. I left the office feeling like something had hollowed out my heart. But things weren't over yet. The next day, I was at work earlier than anyone else. It might have been the first time I'd rushed to the office like this since I started my own company. I'd received a direct message from the vice president of the major corporation we were co-developing a project with. I was desperately trying to piece everything together as a flood of information weighed on me. I contacted Kent, and we met in my office. He was already there, his expression as calm as ever. Though his tone was a bit tenser than usual, I must have looked far more rattled. Kent, trying to calm me, quickly brewed some coffee and brought it to my desk. Mr. Owens, can you go over what we know so far from their side? Yeah. It seems that the documents for the cleaning agent we developed for food factories were leaked to a competitor. It was nearly complete. So this is pretty serious. And apparently, our company's email address was left in the email headers. Was it Emma's email that was used? I didn't respond to Kent, just kept staring at my computer. After about 10 minutes, Kent seemed to sense my silence and spoke up. Mr. Owens, it's time we reach out to them. Yes. Tell them we'll come to explain in person. After getting everything ready, I went to meet the client with Kent. Kent had already prepared a gift as an apology, and we waited for them in the conference room. Since it's a large corporation, their business interests are broad. They'd been our clients since I started the company. They had been pleased with our rapid growth, so I had mixed feelings about the incident. When the door finally clicked open, we stood and bowed deeply. My supposedly calm heart began to stir again. I recognized the familiar faces of the president, Mr. Wallace and Tony. Please, have a seat. Mr. Wallace's voice was restrained but stern, his arms folded and eyes fixed sharply on us. Tony sat beside him, his hand covering his mouth, watching us intently. Mr. Wallace, we deeply apologize for the trouble we have caused. Daniel. Trouble is a mild word. This breach has caused real harm. Because of this leak, our company's future is at risk. I thought you had a keen eye for people. What was the name again? Tony? Emma, correct? That's it. To keep someone like that around who'd leak information. I'm deeply disappointed. Beyond covering the damages, you need to address the responsibility for appointing such a person. Mr. Wallace, clearly unable to contain his anger, continued to lash out at me, barely pausing for breath. It was completely justified. They operate numerous food factories. They chose us for our patents in cleaning agents and devices to cut costs, yet not only did our deal fall through, but sensitive information also leaked to another company. I took a moment, then looked at Tony. So, you've been working here, Tony? Tony, positioning himself between Mr. Wallace and me, responded with sarcastic formality. Yeah, you know, Daniel, we didn't get to talk much. I always thought your little rags to riches story of a broke man going from cleaning park bathrooms to becoming a CEO was just hilarious. Guess that leap from the bottom is too much to handle, huh? People like you, Daniel, you'll always be scraping at the bottom, below guys like me. Mr. Wallace, I apologize for my old classmate's behavior. Tony, so you and Daniel were classmates? Well, regardless, that's not the issue here. Now, moving forward. I interrupted Mr. Wallace, speaking quietly with my head down. By the way, the alleged culprit, Emma, was also a classmate. What? Oh, excuse me, let me clarify. Emma isn't the culprit. As I spoke, Ken took out the prepared documents and handed them to everyone. Mr. Wallace looked confused, and Tony's face soured. I took a deep breath and looked directly at Mr. Wallace. These are the logs from Emma's computer. By the way, she started her leave today. She was on site yesterday afternoon and went straight home after that, so she only used her computer up until the morning. And according to the timestamps on the leaked emails, they were sent late last night. Tony, sneering, slapped the documents with his hand. And you expect that to prove her innocence? Logs from your own company mean nothing, they can just be erased. Besides, isn't her email address proof enough? This information could only have been seen by our two companies. More precisely, only 3 people had access, myself, Kent here, and the lab chief. What? Tony, who had been looking down on us, began to pale. He seemed to be struggling to come up with a response. Mr. Wallace, still piecing things together, interjected. Wait, Daniel, what are you saying? Yes, what I mean is, Emma wouldn't have even been able to see those files. Since we handle so many patented products, we're very strict about access. We can access the files, but to open them requires a passcode, which changes randomly and is programmed to be sent to a specific address. But, couldn't Emma, I don't know, peek over the secretary's shoulder or something? In a last-ditch attempt, Tony pointed at Kent, then quickly lowered his hand when Kent, stone-faced, didn't react. Kent seized the opportunity to press further. Allow me to add, the history list you're looking at wasn't pulled from her email but from her entire device. Daniel extracted it directly. Most of the software our company uses was developed with Daniel's involvement, so this was straightforward. There are even emails Emma thought she'd deleted. Take a closer look. Near the top, don't you recognize that email address? Mr. Wallace squinted through his reading glasses, studying the list intently. This is an address from our own company? Tony. Everyone turned to Tony. He was pale as a sheet, nearly falling off his chair. Just as the tension in the air began to build, he suddenly looked down and burst into laughter, as if a string had snapped. Ha ha! That woman was useless. I got her into your company, but she left evidence everywhere. In the end, I had to get involved myself. Tony's laughter stopped abruptly, his face suddenly filled with realization. A short while later, Mr. Wallace quietly made a phone call. It seemed he had called security. Tony noticed, and he frantically pleaded with him. "Mr. Wallace, I was only doing this for the company. Everything was for you. Why shouldn't we use a poor man's company like his for our gain? With my skills, we can grow, make more money. You're making a mistake letting me go." Tony continued his wild gestures and frantic pleas, but Mr. Wallace, with an icy stare, said firmly, "You call yourself talented, and yet you know nothing about the grit it took to build this company from scratch. You have no right to call this our company. The next time we meet, it will be in court. Take him away." The security guards arrived and escorted Tony out of the room. His face was a ghostly blue, and he wore an expression of utter defeat. Mr. Wallace sighed deeply and bowed his head to me. I nodded slightly in return and began to reveal the remaining details. Emma's email didn't contain any information. It was probably just sent to provide her address. He likely intended for her to leak the information herself. But since our documents are restricted, when he got impatient, he used her address and attached the files himself to initiate this scheme. This is unforgivable. Daniel, I deeply apologize, both for undermining our project and for doubting you. I shook my head and gently lifted Mr. Wallace's face. Then, I took his hand. Could we start again together? I'd like you to be close by to see our continued growth. Daniel. Yes, I'll look forward to working with you. I thought I heard Ken sigh, as if to say I was being too kind, but this felt right to me. Still, I wanted nothing more than to see Emma as soon as possible. The incident remained internal within the company. Mr. Wallace and I agreed to discuss further plans later, and Kent and I returned to our office. I expected everyone to have left by now, but the lights were still on in the assistant office. Thinking it couldn't be, I rushed over. Inside, Emma sat quietly, looking down, almost as if she were afraid to be seen. "Ah. Daniel. Emma, why are you here?" "Well, Kent messaged me, asking me to come by to delete some data from my computer, but wait, where's Kent?" I glanced behind me, but Kent was nowhere to be seen. Slowly, I took a seat beside Emma. We both stayed silent, staring downward. After a while, Emma finally spoke. "Tony called me earlier. He was yelling on the phone. You already know everything, don't you?" "Not everything." "Emma, why did you go along with Tony?" She laughed bitterly, averting her gaze slightly. "Our family business supplies a department store, and Tony was the one in charge of our account. So he knew everything about our shop. At the reunion, he came to me with this plan. He told me it'd be easy for him to end our contract if I refused, so I couldn't say no to spying on your company and stealing information." After saying that much, Emma's tears could no longer be held back. She was breathing heavily, her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. I gently patted her back, waiting until she calmed down. I kept asking myself why I didn't say no, even during the reunion. "Seeing you again, as kind as always. And yet, I was sitting beside you, hiding the betrayal I was planning. It was unbearable. Even when I enjoyed the work and smiled with you, all I felt was regret. I wanted, more than anything, to just laugh with you sincerely. So, that's why the resignation letter?" She nodded, covering her face with her hands. The future of the shop stopped mattering. "I couldn't do this spying thing. But look where it's led. I'm so sorry." I'd forgotten my handkerchief, so I gently removed her hands from her face, wiped her tears away with my fingers, and softly patted her head. "Daniel. Emma, did you enjoy working as an assistant?" I did. Thinking things through, putting them into practice, and then trying again if it didn't work. Each new task felt like an achievement. And being told thank you, that made me so happy. Good. That's all I needed to hear. Then, Emma shook off my hand and stood up. In a voice that sounded both angry and tearful, she shouted, "What are you saying? I deceived you. No matter how kind you are, this is too much." When she swayed, I instinctively caught her, wrapping her in a tight hug. Emma gasped in surprise, and as her strength faded, I held her even closer. "It's all right. I knew everything all along." "What?" Still in an embrace, Emma looked at me with wide eyes, her tear-streaked face showing surprise. The truth was, we had both been hiding things. I'd known about her connection to Tony when I invited her to work with me. When I told Kent, that I wanted to bring you in, he found out everything in no time. He learned that Tony was in charge of your shop's department store account and that if that contract fell through, your shop would be in serious trouble. Naturally, he was against the idea. He warned me there'd be something more to it. Then, why? I met her gaze and spoke clearly. Ever since high school, I'd promised myself that this time, I would protect you. Of course I trusted you. Seeing Emma break down in tears again reminded me of that classroom, right before graduation. As graduation approached, an incident occurred in which the money we'd collected as a class to buy a bouquet for our teacher went missing. Tony stirred things up, and because I'd arrived late that day due to feeling unwell, I quickly became the prime suspect. Before I could even understand what was happening, everyone turned suspicious eyes on me, and they were about to empty my bag. Daniel wouldn't do that. Just because he was late doesn't make him guilty. Then by that logic, Tony, you were absent yesterday, weren't you? What were you doing? Sounds suspicious to me. Oh, it's you again, Emma. I was just sick. Then Daniel could have been in the same situation. I trust him. What about the rest of you? The room fell silent. In the end, the missing envelope was found. It had been turned into the school's lost and found. Apparently, the classmate who dropped it was too embarrassed to admit it, so I'd been wrongly accused. She later apologized to me quietly, crying, but I just heard it was okay since everything was resolved. Afterward, I went up to the rooftop. As I'd hoped, Emma was there. Emma. Daniel, it's all settled now, right? Knowing you, you probably forgave her, didn't you? Ha ha. I laughed, scratching my head. It was over, but Emma had been the only one to believe in me. If not for her, I probably would have just accepted being labeled the culprit. Emma had taken on the entire class just to defend me. As she turned to leave, I summoned my courage and called out from behind her. I'll believe in you, too, Emma, no matter what. What was that? We'll be late for class if we don't get going. My words were lost in the rooftop breeze. Once we graduate, there's no telling if we'll ever meet again. But I was certain that my feelings would never change. Finally, maybe I've repaid you a little. Repay? I didn't do anything that deserves that. Emma's brow furrowed as she spoke, and I gently patted her head, smiling. Ha ha. By the way, I still have your resignation letter. What should I do with it? Wait, even though you knew everything I'd done, even after all this trouble. Daniel, you really are too kind. Agreed. As CEO, he could really use a bit more authority, so please, keep telling him that. Emma and I broke apart instinctively at the sudden voice behind us. Kent stood there, arms crossed, sighing in exaggerated exasperation. Kent? Ah, well, you already know this, but Mr. Owens here is almost dangerously sincere. I mean, inviting a familiar face from the park who turned out to be a rough type to join him in business when he first went independent. And look at him, he's still putting his heart into his work. Kenny. Kent looked at me, not with his usual stern expression, but something closer to a slight smile. He quickly resumed his usual expression and said to me, You're always saying not to miss a chance, right? Daniel. With a wave of his hand, Kent turned and left the office. Now it was just Emma and me again. After a brief silence, Emma spoke up. "You were always someone special to me, Daniel." "Me?" "My life path was decided from the moment I was born. By the time I began to feel conflicted, it was already set in stone that I would take over the family business. And then I heard about your family's troubles. I thought we were opposites, though part of me felt envious." I silently pulled her close again. She tensed briefly but then relaxed, resting against me. "One day, I went to check on you at the park. You were working so hard at a difficult job. People nearby were talking about how much they appreciated the well-kept restrooms. When you were about to leave, one of the tough-looking guys handed you a drink. It hit me that even in hardship, you had built a treasure out of sheer effort. And there I was, letting my own feelings fester without doing anything." I felt ashamed. Emma's hand tightened on my arm. "In the end, I couldn't change myself. But despite everything with Tony, you gave me another chance, a chance to finally reflect on myself. I'm done living by others' expectations or for selfish gains. I want to live true to myself." Just then, Emma suddenly embraced me tightly. She had her face buried in my chest but looked up, meeting my eyes, and whispered with all her strength, "I want to stay by your side, Daniel. I feel the same. I've felt that way since we were students. Emma, will you stay by my side forever?" "Yes, yes." Even as she laughed and said I was squeezing her too tight, I kept holding her close. After all, the person I loved most had finally come back to me. 2 weeks later, Kent and I visited the major corporation. We were there to wrap up the aftermath of the incident and discuss our future plans. The discussions with the company Tony leaked to have already been settled. Although Mr. Wallace was disheartened about the ruined project, my words made his eyes light up. The cleaning agent we'd been co-developing included ingredients sourced overseas, contacts I'd carefully nurtured over the years. Even if they tried to replicate it, we had exclusive agreements preventing anyone else from obtaining those materials. Upon hearing this, Mr. Wallace visibly relaxed, sipping his tea with a smile. In the course of our discussion, he informed us about Tony's punishment. Tony had, of course, been dismissed. His intentional sabotage led to a police investigation. Though they intended to settle out of court, the damages amounted to a sum equivalent to multiple years of his salary. It was said he had screamed nonsense when confronted with the amount. While the court's decision was still pending, Tony would likely spend the rest of his life repaying his debts. On the way back, Kent quietly asked me, "What was Tony's goal in all this? Even if he wanted to bring you down, he must have known the risk." Tony was talented. But there's something that's bothered me. We were only classmates during our junior year. Our names right next to each other on the roster. Our teachers often announced test scores aloud. You're kidding. As I looked out the window, I recalled those days. Maybe, to him, being outdone in every test was humiliating. And then seeing you as CEO finally pushed him over the edge. Well, that's all over now. Yeah. Back at the office, a new executive assistant welcomed us into the president's office. "Welcome back, Mr. Owens, Mr. Irwin. I'll bring you some tea." "Thank you, Emma." Emma officially became the executive assistant. This time, as a full-fledged employee. Meanwhile, Ken took on dual roles, serving as vice president while the new assistant manager was trained. When Emma brought in the tea, our eyes met, and an awkward cough made us both blush. Emma had shown a strong determination to master every part of her job. Given her natural abilities, her reputation among the assistants had transformed. According to Kent, even employees who'd previously harbored resentment apologized to Emma. In turn, Emma asked them to teach me everything you know, earning her widespread respect. Hearing this, I couldn't help but smile, pleased that others could see Emma's remarkable qualities. As for her family's business, Our company purchased the distribution rights from the trading firm when Emma joined us. Convincing her family hadn't been easy. The challenge lay in persuading them after Emma decided not to take over the business. But when I passionately explained that the true legacy was their recipes and our commitment to preserving them, they finally agreed. By updating the packaging with a modern, upscale look and emphasizing the shop's long history, our strategy proved wildly successful. Customers even came from neighboring prefectures, and lines stretched out the door. This naturally fueled our company's growth as well. My work became busier than ever. But my heart was full. Looking up from my computer, I saw Emma standing there. Emma, is something on your mind? Hee, it's already past office hours. I've clocked out too, so any further assistance will have to be off the clock. Oh, what's up? I was just wondering what you'd like for dinner tonight, Daniel. Emma and I recently started living together. How about something hearty? You look a bit pale. With that, Emma placed both hands on my face and leaned in close. I think you might even have a bit of dark circles. From now on, I'll take care of you, including making sure you stay healthy. Are you listening? There was no way I could keep calm in this situation. I wanted to look away, but she had me locked in place. At this close range, she gave me her usual smile. Oh. Don't worry, Daniel, I won't do anything you're hoping for here in the office. Caught red-handed, I couldn't help but get a bit annoyed. And just what am I hoping for? Well, don't make me say it. So if it crossed your mind, that means you were thinking the same thing, right, Emma? I'd never, not here at work. Despite Kent's repeated reminders to keep things professional, I figured today could be an exception. We stayed wrapped up in that blissful silence for a while. Life is a road. Its length is different for each person, and just when you think you know the way, an unexpected turn can appear. Those sudden paths can be intimidating. They might lead to opportunity, or they might lead to despair. No one can tell you the outcome, but if you take a moment to look back at the road you've traveled, you'll find the resolve to move forward without regret. Did you perhaps come here for an interview after seeing this? At my question, she nodded silently. I run a small diner that rarely sees any customers. One day, a woman showed up, dressed in worn-out clothes, with a raspy voice and an elderly appearance. Oh no! She was holding a help-wanted flyer I'd posted a few years ago. But the truth is, with my current financial situation, I can't afford to hire anyone. Still, I couldn't turn away this woman who had come looking for help. Ma'am, would you be willing to work here? Oh. I decided to help this elderly woman who seemed to be in some sort of trouble. I even let her use the bath, and afterward. Thank you, it felt wonderful. When she opened the door, she had transformed beyond anything I expected. My name's Eric Owens, and I'm 30. In a small corner of town, I run a little diner called Harvest. Reality sure is tough. I muttered to myself with a sigh as I cleared tables. My diner is what you'd call empty. If one or two customers come by during lunch, it's a good day. There are often days when I go the entire business hours without seeing a single soul. Oh man. With things like this, I'll get nagged at again. And just as I grumbled, sure enough, a call came from that person. Hello? Are you finally ready to come back, Eric? I didn't say anything. The caller was my father. I didn't need to ask what it was about. My father was dead set against me starting this diner. That's not a real job. It's just playing house. It's about time you got serious. I stayed silent. He was always about work, never once attending a school event of mine. I never felt comfortable around his stern face and intimidating tone. Not that he didn't have a single redeeming quality as a parent, but still. I'm hanging up now. I've got a customer here. I ended the call saying with those words, it was my best attempt at bravado to impress him. The truth was something I could never let him know. Today again, my diner was practically empty, and no customers were on the horizon. Excuse me. Whoa. I'd let my guard down and ended up dropping dishes on the table in surprise. At some point, someone had appeared at the entrance. The reason I was so puzzled was because the person looked odd. A brown shawl pulled low over her head, covering her hair and face. Despite it already being early summer, she was wearing a spring coat, completely tattered. Her voice was frail and hoarse, and her back was hunched. Upon closer look, her hands and feet were trembling. "Are you all right, ma'am?" I couldn't help but ask out of concern. "I'm, cough. Oh, hang on. I'll bring you some water." As the woman started coughing, I quickly fetched a glass of water. Supporting her arm and gently rubbing her back, I helped her drink slowly. "Thank you." As she seemed to calm down a bit, I took a closer look at her. Could she be an elderly person who got lost? Or maybe her shaking hands and feet were due to poor health. Possibly homeless. This. Suddenly, she rummaged through her coat pocket. In front of me, she unfolded a crumpled sheet of paper. "Please, take a look at this." Oh. Seeing this, I was speechless with surprise. The paper she showed me was surprisingly a job flyer. It was the one I'd handed out half a year ago when I first opened this diner. "Did you come here after seeing this?" She didn't say anything. At my question, she simply nodded in silence. What I truly felt inside was, this could be trouble. "I'm so sorry, this flyer is from a while back. We're not hiring anymore." Oh. When I told her the truth, she let out a small gasp. Her mouth moved as if she wanted to say something, but her sore throat seemed to hold her back. Eventually, she looked down, defeated. "For now, please take a seat. Would you like some warm tea?" Seeing her so disappointed, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy and wanted to do something for her. "Are you hungry?" She was silent. She walked unsteadily, hesitantly taking a seat near the entrance. As I asked what to cook, she didn't answer, keeping her head down, but then a loud sound filled the room. She was surprised. Embarrassed, she quickly pressed her stomach, which had just rumbled loudly. It was clear she was quite hungry, likely homeless, after all. She might have been rejected by other places and saw that flyer as her last hope. "Ma'am, after you've eaten, would you like to take a bath?" "Oh, I live nearby. Please come over." Since I couldn't hire her in my current financial state, it was the least I could do. And so, I took this worn-down elderly woman back to my apartment. Or at least, that was the plan. "Who are you?" It was like watching an illusion, where someone enters a box and emerges completely transformed. When she opened the bathroom door, I was stunned. "Thank you for the bath. It's been a while, and it felt amazing." Her voice was now clearer, thanks to the steam. Her voice still held a hint of strain, but the person standing before me, dressed in a precariously revealing outfit, was a young woman. Realizing my gaze, she shifted uncomfortably, fidgeting nervously. The shirt I lent her should have been big enough, but as she straightened her back, I realized just how surprisingly tall she was. The shirt barely covered her, almost revealing her new underwear. As she tugged at the hem to hide it, I noticed her disheveled hair and rough skin, as well as her sunken cheeks, yet even so, she was undeniably beautiful. You've given me food and a bath. I know it's a lot to ask, but could I ask for something else?" "Yes. Anything you need." "Thank you, then. Could you lend me something to wear on the bottom, and an outer layer, too?" she asked, her face turning red, and I couldn't help but glance at her chest. Her shirt looked ready to pop a button from the tension. "Oh. I'm sorry. I'll get them right away." I bolted to the closet and grabbed the largest pair of pants and hoodie I could find. Sorry about that. I thought you'd be, smaller. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I bowed my head apologetically. I had no idea she'd be so well built. And she was not an old woman at all, but a young woman around my age. Just minutes earlier, I was thinking, a quick trip to the convenience store for underwear should be fine. My observational skills were embarrassingly lacking. I felt too sheepish to lift my head until I heard her start to giggle. Oh, Eric, you still haven't realized, have you? What? I looked up, and there she was, smiling as she pointed to herself. It's me, Mia. It's been, 14 years since we graduated. No way. This was the most shocking moment of the day. The young beauty I'd mistaken for an old lady turned out to be my high school classmate. Mia, as in, that Mia. Yes. I'm so glad you finally recognized me. Though I just got my voice back too. Her voice had been strained from staying outside for so long. And, weakened by hunger, she'd barely had the strength to speak. Mia. Mia Harrison smiled that same slightly awkward smile she used to have back then. Outside, what do you mean, Mia? Well, a few things happened, and I don't exactly have a home right now. What? I couldn't believe a classmate of mine was in such a situation. Surprised, I was about to press her for details when I leaned forward in my seat, and she laughed softly, saying, this is starting to feel like an interrogation. You even served me food just now. Oh, sorry, I got carried away. But really, you opened a diner, just like you dreamed. You made it, Eric. Mia looked up at me, her eyes warm with a gentle smile. Seeing that mature expression made my heart skip a beat, and I suddenly remembered the taste of fried chicken. Hey, would you mind if I ate with you here? The one who spoke to me while I was eating my lunch was a well-known beauty in school, admired for her cheerful personality and popularity. It was the first time I'd ever spoken face-to-face with a female classmate. Wow, the breeze feels great. Why doesn't anyone else eat on the rooftop? Well, technically it's off limits. No way. Then, this place will be our little secret spot. Mia had whispered with a mischievous tone, and my 16-year-old self suddenly felt guilty. The reason I was sneaking up to the off-limits rooftop in the first place was because I didn't want to eat lunch with my classmates. Take your lunch with you, my father said this morning as he left ahead of me, with his usual blank expression. Back in school, my dad was the one who packed my lunch, without understanding how much effort it took. I just thought it was embarrassing. Wow, that looks amazing. What? Before I realized, Mia had gotten close enough that her forehead nearly touched mine. She was peeking into my lunchbox, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Don't look. Why not? That fried chicken looks delicious. That's exactly the problem. What? Whenever my dad packed my lunch, it always included fried chicken. The box was neatly divided in half, rice on one side and fried chicken on the other. That was it. Eric's lunch is kinda funny. Ever since some classmates laughed at it, I had hated eating lunch in front of others. But Mia didn't laugh. Fried chicken, oh, lucky you. She stared at my lunchbox, practically drooling. Do you like fried chicken? Yeah. I love it. But suddenly, her excitement faded as she opened up her own lunchbox. Then she lifted the lid for me to see. Whoa. This time, I was the one staring. There were spinach salad and stir-fried carrots and burdock root, sautéed red and yellow peppers and glossy cherry tomatoes. Her small lunchbox was packed with vibrant, vegetable-based dishes. Looks delicious. I couldn't help but say what was on my mind. It was such a stark contrast from my dad's plain lunches, clearly made with a lot of care. I felt like I could see the love her family put into it, but Mia gave a small, sheepish smile. My family runs a farm, so we've got tons of vegetables. I see. If you want, help yourself, Eric. Wait, really? Fried chicken's great, but a little balance wouldn't hurt. Without waiting for an answer, Mia placed some of her stir-fry vegetables on top of my rice. Back then, I actually hated burdock root, but that stir-fry was unbelievably good. From that day on, whenever I ate lunch, Mia would quietly join me on the rooftop. We'd share food, swapping my fried chicken for her vegetable dishes. Wow! Your dad's fried chicken is amazing, Eric. And I really like the stewed potatoes from your place. Oh, I made those. What? Well, you know, for reasons. The usually lively Mia would always trail off when it came to talking about her family. I never pushed further, because I had my own reasons too. My mom isn't around at home. Oh. Just a week before starting high school, my mom got sick. When my bright and cheerful mom passed away, it felt like all the warmth was sucked out of the Owens household. I was always alone during the day, and even when my dad came home, we only exchanged the bare minimum of words. Deep down, I always felt lonely, but still, I guess hunger doesn't wait. Eric? There was one time I intentionally left my lunch at home. It was right after my mom was gone, and I had no appetite. I thought it'd feel satisfying, a bit of revenge against my dad for everything, but that afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything in class or during team practice. My stomach growled constantly, leaving me embarrassed instead. It taught me one thing. No matter what, you need food to keep your strength up. No, that's not it, Eric. What? Eric, that is. I think eating gives you strength. Mia's words shifted my perspective, which had always tended to look backward. From then on, my lunch wasn't something I had to eat to get through the afternoon, but something I wanted to eat to tackle the afternoon. I started getting curious about food and cooking. Today, I packed my own lunch for the first time. Wow, that looks amazing. It looks delicious. It was a huge hassle and didn't go as planned at all, but I kind of enjoyed it. I even thought maybe a job in cooking wouldn't be bad. Like running a diner or something. That sounds awesome. I'd love to go to your diner, Eric. It's not like I've decided yet. Well, if you do, use veggies from my farm. I'll deliver them myself, no question. Yeah. If that happened, I'd get to see Mia all the time. Just the thought of it made this casual idea seem like an incredibly good one. I was probably already in love with her long before I realized it. In the end, after I graduated, I took on a different job. But at 28, I finally made up my mind to quit. I got my culinary license and used my savings to open the diner just 6 months ago. And the results have been hard to bear. That was the best food I've ever had. It's hard to believe you don't get more customers. Yeah. Hearing that was at least some comfort. Honestly, it's a wonder I've lasted 6 months. I definitely can't afford to hire staff, and, to tell the truth, I've even thought about closing the place. So I started to apologize to Mia for coming all the way here only to find out I wasn't hiring anyone. She gave me that same, slightly awkward smile. I didn't come here because I wanted a part-time job. What? But I do have a suggestion for you, Eric. Would you hear me out? A suggestion. She said she wanted to at least repay me for the food and bath. Mia shared an idea with me. It was something that could completely turn around my struggling diner's fortunes. Look for lettuce with a clean cut at the stem and a fresh look all over, that'll be the tastiest. As for tomatoes, check the stems. If they're shriveled or dull, they're not fresh. I see. The next day, Mia took me to the produce market. One by one, she pointed out the freshest and most delicious vegetables on display, with ease and confidence. Her knowledge and sharp eye for vegetables were impressive enough to leave the greengrocer owner speechless. Wow, I never thought I'd meet a young person so knowledgeable about veggies these days. I'm so glad, so I'll throw in a big discount. Oh, thank you so much. With his generosity, we ended up getting loads of fresh vegetables at a bargain price. So, are we using these for a new menu, Mia? Exactly, Eric. Mia hugged a large cabbage with a cheerful smile. As for my paycheck, you can wait until the sales go up. Last night, she had said, please let me work at your diner. She was certain she had an idea that could boost our sales. Oh, and if possible, could I live in as well? Wait, what? Mia had pressed the point, explaining that she had nowhere else to go. So, I ended up hiring her as a part-timer, and somehow I now found myself living under the same roof as my first love. Still, all we need to do is slice these and arrange them on plates. Is this really going to work? Back at the diner, I started feeling uneasy. Following Mia's suggestions, I had bought fresh produce and rearranged the tables completely, but would this really boost our sales? This place has such a comforting atmosphere. I'm sure it'll work. Mia reassured me with a smile. A few days later, I found myself wrestling with a mountain of vegetables in the kitchen. Eric, we're almost out of shredded daikon radish. Roger that. Oh, and more lettuce, tomatoes, and cabbage too. Got it, got it. I was slicing everything in sight as Mia called out orders from the hall. Daikon radish, lettuce, tomatoes, cabbage, and broccoli. I felt like I'd seen a lifetime's worth of vegetables in one day. And the reason for this madness. It's true, Mia was right. I just thought if we offered unlimited fresh vegetables, people would definitely come, she had proposed. At first, I was skeptical, no, I was 90% sure it wouldn't work. I tried to ride the big portions trend and offered hearty dishes as the flagship dish. But it had completely backfired. Nearby restaurants were thriving with large serving menus. So I was convinced that vegetables wouldn't attract anyone. I had agreed only because, with the thought of possibly closing anyway, I figured there was nothing to lose. Wow, this lettuce is so crisp and sweet. The tomato tastes like fruit. I haven't eaten this many veggies in ages, it feels like my body is thanking me. It turned out the diner was packed mostly with women. Everyone was enjoying the carefully selected vegetables Mia had picked out, smiling with satisfaction. Well, it's a hit. Let's call it the delicious fresh veggie buffet. Mia winked at me as she cleared the empty plates. Yeah. I had no choice but to admit it. Thanks to her, the diner had escaped the threat of closing. Most places around here offer filling and affordable meals, but they're usually more geared toward men, right? After closing up on the day, we recorded our highest sales ever. Mia explained over our staff meal. Just a short walk from here, there was a company with a predominantly female workforce. Women want to eat healthy and incorporate more vegetables, but they're busy with work and end up wasting produce they buy. So it's tough to keep up with every day. I overheard them talking about it once while passing by. I see. If we were going to compete with other big portion menus, we'd need something that really grabbed the customer's attention, otherwise, we'd never beat the long-established spots. So, the answer was to boldly change our target. From men who favored hearty meals to health-conscious women. Of course, guys want to eat veggies too sometimes, right? And after filling up on fresh vegetables, the next thing they'll crave is meat or fish? Exactly. So, I think you should prep more fried chicken tomorrow. You're not just saying that because you want it, are you? I teased her. At that, Mia, who had been tossing pieces of fried chicken into her mouth one after another, froze. Well, it's delicious. I'd be sad if there wasn't any left for staff meals. Sure enough, the next day, her prediction was spot on. I'll take the fried chicken set menu. 1 fried chicken set menu for me too. 3 fried chicken set menus in total, please. As word of the vegetable buffet spread, more men started showing up as well. After filling up on the light, fresh veggies, they wanted something rich and hearty, leading them to order our original signature dish, the heaping fried chicken set menu. Ah! Another fried chicken set menu, please. Every time our stock of chicken dwindled, Mia's brows furrowed with dismay, and I struggled to contain my laughter as she peeked out from the kitchen. Before I knew it, a month had flown by. During lunchtime, lines started forming outside the diner every day. We couldn't keep up with produce from just the local greengrocer, so Mia used her family connections to get fresh veggies directly from the farm. This only boosted our reputation further, and Diner Harvest went from the brink of closure to the neighborhood's most popular spot. Mia, go ahead without me. I'm just going to rest here for a bit. Thank you. I'll take you up on that. I slumped onto the table while Mia, looking exhausted, drifted toward the bathroom. This had become our routine after coming back to the apartment. I was grateful, of course, for all the customers, but I'm so tired. Even with my endurance, I was running on empty. This past month had been a whirlwind. Even though I was living with my beautiful high school classmate and spending all my time with her except when we slept, I hadn't had a moment to feel nervous. Mia, how long? How long would she be staying here? As I listened to the sound of shower she was taking, I closed my eyes. I'll just rest until she gets back. But before I knew it, I drifted into a deep sleep. Wake up! Eric, wake up! When I opened my eyes, someone was gently shaking my shoulder. If you sleep here, you'll catch a cold. The voice was soft, kind, and clear, washing over me as I lay slumped on the table. Your voice. What? Your throat. It's completely healed now. I'm glad. She was surprised. I heard her intake of breath, and her hand quickly pulled away from my shoulder. Then, I heard a faint rustling right beside me. Wondering what it was, I finally lifted my head, and what? I was instantly wide awake. Mia! What are you doing? Reflexively, I turned around to face the other way. Because Mia had come out of the bath without wearing pajama pants, which meant her pure white underwear was in plain view. I didn't see anything, I swear. Just, please, hurry up and put them on. It's fine. What? Then, Mia moved around to face me directly, her hand reaching for the buttons on her shirt. I quickly stood up, grabbing her hand. What are you doing? I know we're both exhausted, but I'm doing it on purpose. I don't mind if you see everything, Eric. What? When she looked up, I saw her face, on the verge of tears. If it's you, I don't mind anything, because I've loved you for so long. What? I've loved you. Ever since high school, since those days we ate lunch together on the rooftop. Ever since then. I was speechless. Mia placed her hand over mine, pressing it gently against her chest. Through the thin fabric of her pajamas, I could feel the warmth radiating from her body and the fast beat of her heart. Suddenly, my own heart began pounding in sync. There isn't much time. Her quiet murmur snapped me out of it. I shook my hand free and turned away from her. This isn't right. Well, I don't know what's going on with you, Mia, but you'll regret this later. Though I pretended I was saying it for her sake, deep down, I knew it was really for me. I was afraid that if I gave in, our happy days together would end, and I couldn't even bring myself to tell her, I've loved you, too. Let's just go to bed. We're both exhausted. Eric. A single tear slipped down Mia's cheek. A sharp pain struck my chest, and then she gently took my hand, holding it softly. With that familiar, slightly troubled smile, she looked at me, just like always. For the next few days, we worked together with a strained awkwardness between us. Luckily, the diner was incredibly busy. One food review site had ranked us as the top buffet spot in the area. And the customer flow only increased. At least while we were working, we didn't have time to feel awkward. Eric, we're almost out of Japanese mustard greens, and we need more fried chicken set menus too. Got it. I'll get the Japanese mustard greens prepped right away. Mia. Not much time left. What did she really mean by that? I couldn't quite bring myself to ask her directly, so I'd been mulling it over for days, questioning myself. Her tone that night had sounded almost desperate. And then, we somehow made it through another lunch rush. Just as I started prepping for the dinner shift without a moment to breathe. Sorry, but we're closed for lunch. Despite the closed sign out front, someone had come in. The door slid open, and Mia went to greet them, but moments later, her scream echoed into the kitchen. Help! Mia? I rushed out of the kitchen and headed for her, heart racing. And I saw Mia with her wrist gripped tightly by an unfamiliar man. So this is where you've been hiding. Let's go, Mia. No. Let go of her, right now. I stepped in between them, grabbing the man's hand and forcefully pulling it away. With Mia shielded behind me, I glared at him, anger boiling up inside. He looked young, about our age. With an irritatingly smug grin that I couldn't stand. You are the manager here? Well, she's quitting today. What? So, why don't you go ahead and pay her severance and this month's wages right now? I bet you've got enough with all the business here, right? No. The man's smile widened even more as he spoke, and I could feel Mia tense up behind me. Spreading my arms protectively, I stood firm in front of her. Who exactly are you? What an idiot you are. Using a farmer who's a family acquaintance of ours, of course, we'd find you. Or did you actually want us to come get you? What? No. I'm not going back to you, not ever. Mia's face turned pale, and her legs shook. But she still glared defiantly at him. Seeing her courage, I understood what I had to do. Leave. Now. What? I wasn't done talking to Mia. I said, get out. I'm not saying it a third time. I'll call the police. The police? Damn, remember this, Mia. Cursing under his breath, the man shot out of the diner with lightning speed. The moment he left, Mia collapsed to her knees on the floor. Mia. I'm sorry, Eric. She looked up at me with a sad smile. A tear rolled quietly down her cheek. Once her tears had settled, Mia quietly began to tell me her story, piece by piece. It was a story of the incredibly harsh days she had endured. It started when I was in 4th grade. My mom and dad went to heaven together in an accident. With both her parents gone and her grandparents already passed, Mia was left all alone. She had few connections with other relatives and found herself completely alone in the world until a couple approached her at the funeral. If you'd like, you could come live with us. They were distant relatives who introduced themselves as the Harrison family. They told her that if she didn't come with them, she'd have to go into a foster facility. Believing it was better for her to live with them, they were the only ones among her distant relatives willing to take her in. We're farmers. If you want, you could even help us around the farm, they'd said with gentle smiles. Feeling she could trust them, Mia agreed to be adopted. But then, as soon as the adoption was finalized, their attitude changed completely. They said I was just a burden, not part of the family. No. Every day, no matter the weather, Mia was forced to help on the farm as soon as she got home from school. When farm work was done, she had to prepare meals, clean, do laundry. She was treated like a servant, even though she was just a young child. And if that weren't enough, they'd say meat and fish are too good for a freeloader. So I got really good at cooking vegetables. Oh. Mia gave a small, pained smile, but I felt like the world went dark around me. Back in high school, I thought her vegetable-filled lunches were because she loved vegetables. In reality, she hadn't been allowed to eat anything but vegetables. And after high school? I'd heard you were planning to skip college and get a job at a family friend's company. That was a lie. The truth is, I ended up staying to help my uncle and aunt. For over 10 years, they kept working her harder, with endless farm chores and housework each day. With inadequate nutrition, Mia had grown thin and frequently fell ill. And that's when the Harrison couple changed their tune. We're sorry for everything. Go on, eat as much as you like. Oh, don't worry, sweetie. You can even have our portions. Eat up. Their sudden kindness felt strange, and they began giving her meat and fish, even excusing her from chores. It seemed like Mia's health had finally been restored. But it was all for a sinister purpose. Earlier this year, I found out the farm wasn't doing well financially, and they'd accumulated debt. So, they were planning to make me work at a nightlife industry to pay it off. What? When I heard, I couldn't bear it. I escaped from them, using what little money I had hidden away to get as far away as possible. And then I ended up here. It was by chance that she'd found one of my help wanted flyers, a flyer I'd almost forgotten I distributed. When she saw the diner's name, she thought, could it be? Harvest, was that from my last name? Yeah. Actually, I hadn't forgotten the promise we made on that rooftop. When I finally opened my own diner, I borrowed a part of her name. So that maybe we'd meet again someday. I hoped this diner would bring Mia and me together once more. I'm sorry. After hearing all that, it must not be a name you're fond of anymore. No. I think it's wonderful. Besides, if the Harrisons hadn't taken me in, I wouldn't have met you. And now, I get to see you again, so my heart is full. She said this with a genuine and radiant smile. It wasn't the troubled and hesitant smile I was used to. And somehow, seeing it filled me with a sense of unease. Mia. The man earlier, he's my uncle's son. His name is Jack. He must have heard from the farm we buy from that I was working here. They've known my uncle and aunt for a long time. Mia, then why? Why did you go out to buy the vegetables, knowing it might reveal your location? I asked, but Mia only smiled in response. And then, a few days later. That day, none of the vegetables we'd ordered, not even a single cherry tomato, were delivered to the diner. Please, Tyler, tell me why. Wait, what? As she spoke with the farm over the phone, Mia's face grew pale halfway through the call. She put the receiver down with a trembling hand. They said they won't sell us any more vegetables. What? They were furious, accusing us of misleading customers about the origin of our produce and of wasting perfectly good vegetables. What? Our vegetable supplier was indeed a small, unknown farm. But we'd always been upfront about it, and our customers loved the fresh taste. Any leftovers were skillfully incorporated by Mia into our staff meals. So nothing went to waste. In fact, with business booming, we'd rarely had any surplus. Jack. What? It must be Jack and my uncle and aunt spreading these lies. That was the moment. Mia slowly removed her apron. Mia. I'm sorry, Eric. This is my fault, because I didn't go back with Jack that day. I can't stand for this diner to be spoken of so poorly. With a sad smile, Mia turned her back to me and started walking toward the entrance. Mia. Hearing you call my name made me so happy. Honestly, I wanted to belong to you completely. Goodbye. Mia. I chased after her. I held onto her trembling shoulders, stopping her in her tracks. Don't go, please, don't leave. But you said their family is in debt, didn't you? What? She turned back to face me, her cheeks streaked with tears that kept flowing. Handing her the apron she'd just removed, I looked into her tearful face. Let me help. I'm not letting those people take you away. Eric. I gently wiped her tears away with my fingers, feeling a new resolve strengthen within me. I pulled my phone from my apron, took a deep breath. Then, I made a call to a certain person. "Hello, it's been a while." "Yeah, it's me." That call marked the start of a turning point for us. With our veggie buffet on hold, I decided to temporarily close the diner. It was a painful decision just as business was picking up, but neither Mia nor I was ready to give up. If it comes down to it, I'll go speak directly to Tyler. "I'm sure I can clear up this misunderstanding. I'm going with you." "But what if Jack shows up while we're gone? What if he does something to the diner? We can always rebuild the diner." "But if I let her go alone, I had a horrible feeling we'd never see each other again." That dark premonition was too ominous to voice. I didn't say it out loud, not wanting to make Mia any more anxious. "Why don't we get something to eat before we face this?" "I'll make anything you like. Come to think of it, I haven't eaten anything since morning." "Really, anything I want?" "Of course." Then, even before she could finish, I'd already started preparing. I took out the chicken I had marinated last night and carefully mixed flour and starch in my special blend. All to make the diner's signature fried chicken that she said she loved so much. After we devoured a heaping platter of fried chicken together and finished cleaning up, we decided to go all out and deep clean the kitchen. And that's when he walked through the door. Figured if I waited long enough at Anderson Farm, you'd show up eventually. "Good thing I came over here, right, Mia?" With a nasty grin, Jack barged into the diner. Mia's body tensed for a moment. But after taking a deep breath, she walked toward him of her own accord. "Leave. I'm not going back with you. Ungrateful brat. My parents took you in like their own, even though you were practically a stranger. I even treated you like a little sister. And now, as soon as there's debt, you abandon us? Are you talking about the time you shoved me into a rice paddy? Or when you burned the birthday gift my friend gave me? Or maybe when you left me in the mountains where bears were known to roam?" He couldn't say anything. As Mia calmly listed these incidents, anger boiled up inside me, ready to burst. Mia turned and gave me a reassuring smile, as if to say, "It's okay." Her calmness helped me regain my composure. "Was it you? The one spreading false rumors and blocking the vegetable deliveries to this diner?" "Yeah, that was me. I couldn't stand seeing profits going to some outsider's farm when we have plenty of veggies of our own." He replied shamelessly, even a bit smug. He added, grinning slyly, "If you give me a back, I might consider selling to you again." Without missing a beat, Mia and I responded in unison. "No, thanks. Neither do I." "What? Honestly, Harrison Farm's vegetables aren't worth it. They're full of weeds, no one bothers with proper watering or fertilizing. And everyone spends harvest season slacking off, so all you're left with is poor quality produce. That's why no other store wants it. I would rather stop a vegetable buffet than trade it for Mia. I'm sure sales would drop dramatically, but I'll see what I can do. If the alternative means doing business with you, I'd rather let this diner sit empty." "You little..." Jack's face flushed, his shoulders trembling in anger as he glared between us. Finally, his stare fixed on Mia, and that's when I stepped forward from behind the counter. "Did you buy that watch with all that debt? Or were you planning for Mia to pay it off, so you started spending money you didn't have?" "What?" When I pointed at his wrist, Jack's mouth dropped open. There, around his wrist, was a watch encircled with jewels around the face, an unmistakably expensive piece. Something doesn't add up. For someone in debt, that watch, that necklace, and those rings all look pretty extravagant. Where's the money coming from? Like it matters where it's from. Just give me back Mia, she's going to work for us until that debt is gone. People who cover themselves in gaudy jewelry like that usually have something they're hiding, or so I've heard. Seems accurate to me. Enough with this nonsense. You're just spouting a bunch of crap. Eric. In a fit of rage, Jack clenched his right hand into a fist and swung it at me. With a voice like a scream, Mia called my name. Both of them must have thought that the bejeweled, heavy ring on his hand was about to slam into my cheek. "Hey, stop! It's breaking!" "What?" The one screaming in pain wasn't me. It was Jack, with his arm twisted painfully behind his back as I pinned him to the floor. "No way, what just happened?" "I didn't see a thing." Mia's eyes widened as she saw me pinning Jack to the floor. And no wonder, just before his punch could land, I dropped my stance and charged at him. In the next moment, I grabbed his arm and, with my full weight, forced him down to the ground. It all happened in less than a second. "Stay down unless you really want it broken." Okay. I'll stay down, but who the hell are you?" "Me? I'm a former police officer." When I said that, both Jack and Mia fell silent, simultaneously letting out a stunned, "Huh?" At that moment, the sound of a police car grew closer. Jack turned a shade paler beneath me. "By now, your parents are probably being brought in too." "Why?" "The investigation is already complete. We know you and your parents have been running scams together." "No." Jack slumped as the officers entered, and I handed him over to the detectives. As he was escorted into the police car, another man stepped into the diner. "Still sharp as ever, huh? That detective's intuition of yours, how'd you know that guy would be here?" "Years of experience." The silver-haired man gave that blunt reply and nothing more. It was my father, a former detective, who had predicted Jack would show up here and called in support from the police station. "What's going on?" Seeing Mia's confusion, I explained the truth. Before I quit my former job and became the owner of this diner, I was a police officer stationed at a local precinct. From my experience and instincts from my time on the force, I had a gut feeling that Jack might be involved in something shady. So, I asked my father to use his old contacts and look into Jack and the Harrison family. It turned out my hunch was right. They were part of a scam targeting elderly people in rural areas, making enough money to live lavishly despite their supposed debt. The police had already been investigating them as a family-run group of fraudsters. "Thanks, Dad. Now Mia is free from them. She can finally live her life without being tied down. Don't forget to retake the police entrance exam." "Yeah. That was our deal. I'm going back to being a police officer." When I nodded at my father, Mia gasped and covered her mouth with her hand, saying, "What? What do you mean, Eric?" "I made a deal with him," I said. "In exchange for his help, I promised to go back to being a cop." "Isn't that right, Dad? I didn't raise you to work in this kind of job. You should be satisfied now." "Yeah." I nodded as I took off my apron. Then, I handed it to Mia, who stood there in stunned silence. "If it's all right with you, can I trust you to take care of this diner?" "What?" "I'll go with you to talk to Tyler. If I tell him I'm a former cop planning to go back on duty, he might be more willing to listen." "So, when you told me not to leave, this is what you meant, leaving me behind." "It's the same for me." Just as Mia revealed her location to the farmers to help the diner, I wanted to protect her. For me, going back to the police force was a small price to pay for that. "I want you to be happy, from now on. Because I've always loved you too, Mia." "That's unfair, telling me that now." Tears dripped onto the floor beneath her as she lowered her head. But when she looked up again, no longer crying, she fixed her gaze firmly on my father. "Mr. Owens, I have one request." "What is it?" "Could you try one last meal that Eric has cooked?" "What?" To my surprise, Mia handed the apron back to me. Then, grabbing my arm, she pulled me toward the kitchen. "Mia, make that dish, Eric. I know he'll understand. That dish." Following her lead, I started cooking. I glanced over, surprised to see my gruff father sitting quietly at the counter. About 10 minutes later, When the dish was ready, Mia carried the tray over to my father. "Here you go. Our special fried chicken set menu." A plate piled high with large, crispy pieces of fried chicken sat in front of him. The only side dish was a bowl of rice. There was no soup or pickled vegetables. It was a simple, no-frills meal, and that's what made it the signature dish of Diner Harvest. "This is..." my father muttered quietly without even picking up his chopsticks. I knew he'd recognize it. "Because this dish is..." "Do you remember, Dad? When I was in high school, you always made my lunches." "Yeah. You'd come home late at night and leave the house earlier than me in the morning. But no matter how busy you were, unless you were on overnight duty, you always made sure I had a packed lunch. Now that I've worked as a cop, I finally understand how hard that must have been for you." That's true. I feel bad saying this, but there were times I was embarrassed by those lunches. It was always just rice and fried chicken, but he made those lunches for me. Back when my mother was still alive, I told her, "Fried chicken is my favorite thing in the world." So, despite having no experience with cooking, he made fried chicken for me every day to cheer me up. When I realized that what had once been an embarrassing memory became the most precious one of my life. Thank you, Dad. The person I am today is because of those lunches. Eric, I wanted to show my gratitude, so I became a police officer to live up to your expectations. And because I became a cop, I found my true dream. I wanted to make people smile with the fried chicken you made, the best in the world." He was speechless. With wide eyes and trembling hands, my father picked up his chopsticks. Then he grabbed the top piece of fried chicken and, as soon as he took a bite, "Maggie!" A single tear slipped from my father's eye as he softly uttered the name of my late mother. "Maggie is my mother's name." "Of course," I thought, smiling. "Because you made it with Mom's recipe." And this time, I recreated it from my memory. It's just like hers. Maggie's taste, exactly. The chopsticks fell from his hands as he covered his face, tears flowing freely. Losing my mother had hurt him more than anyone. Though he rarely showed his emotions, he had loved her more than anything. "You're amazing, you know that?" He lifted his head and quietly praised me. He was amazed by how I'd recreated my mother's fried chicken. And also he was amazed by the fact that I was walking the path I'd chosen for myself. "It's incredible," he said, finally acknowledging my efforts. "I promised Maggie, your mother, at her funeral that I would raise you into a fine man, even on my own. Even though all I knew about your favorite food was that you liked fried chicken. Dad, I thought making you follow in my footsteps as a cop was the way to fulfill that promise. But it seems that was just my selfishness." For the first time, I saw my father smile as he picked up his chopsticks again. In no time, he had devoured the fried chicken and rice, then stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do what you want, Eric. If this is the path you've chosen, then keep walking it." "Dad, are you sure about the promise? A diner is just as respectable a job, you and Mia taught me that." Then, turning to Mia, my father bowed his head. "Please, continue to take care of my son." "Of course, right, Eric?" Mia, wiping away her tears, stood by my side. As I fought back my own tears, I bowed my head to my father and said, "Thank you." "All right, let's start fresh and keep going strong." "You got it." The next morning, we stood in the diner, ready to face the day with renewed determination. Together, Mia and I were going to talk to Tyler. We would explain the misunderstanding, however many times it took for him to understand. Nodding to each other, when we opened the door to leave, the two of us froze, both saying, "Huh?" at the same time. Could it be? A small truck had appeared in front of the diner. Its bed piled high with what looked like the freshest vegetables. An elderly man stepped out of the truck, raising a hand toward us. "Mia, I brought you some vegetables. Will you use them again?" "Tyler, why?" "Well, you see." With an apologetic expression, Tyler explained the reason. He had recently found out that Mia was the daughter of the Lawson couple. You mean, my parents? Exactly. I was shocked to learn that they passed away more than 20 years ago. They helped me out so much back in the day. Mia's parents had both been lawyers, running their own law firm. Tyler had once been tricked by an acquaintance and was on the verge of losing his farm. It was Mia's parents who helped him and his family avoid that disaster. Such wonderful people. And to think that Mia, who ended up with the Harrison family, was actually the Lawsons' daughter. You never know how people are connected in life. Yes, really. With tears in her eyes, Mia stood beside me as Tyler apologized, surprising me with the unexpected connection. He admitted to believing the lies and letting his anger cloud his judgment. He apologized for the cruel words he had spoken to Mia, the daughter of the people who had once helped him, and for not realizing the long years of suffering Mia had endured, failing to help her when she needed it most. I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll grow even better vegetables for the two of you. I'll make sure the best produce of the season always goes straight to this diner. Let that be my way of making amends, if you'll allow it. Yes, thank you. Tears flowed freely as Mia quietly took my hand. I squeezed her hand in return and nodded firmly. And just like that, Diner Harvest was once again able to serve the freshest vegetables, all approved by Mia, who had a keen eye for quality. On the day we relaunched our buffet, a long line of eager customers awaited us. Every day after that, the diner continued to overflow with smiling faces. I've been thinking, maybe everything I went through as Mia Harrison was for this day, for this moment. Mia turned toward me with a gentle smile. The body that had been so thin and frail when we reunited had, over the past 2 years, filled out to a healthy and fuller figure. Her hair and skin now glowed with vitality, and today, she was more radiant than ever. I stood there, momentarily stunned, unable to take my eyes off her. Come on, Eric, pull it together. The ceremony is about to start. Yeah. Today was our wedding day. It was a very small ceremony, with just my father and a few close friends who had been there for us. But Mia looked so stunning in her wedding dress. I was in the waiting room, completely overwhelmed with nerves. If seeing you like this is thanks to all we've been through, then maybe it wasn't all bad after all. Don't say that. I still can't forgive them. It doesn't matter if it's the past or the future. I never want you to go through anything like that again, Mia. I'm sorry. Mia laughed softly and gently placed a hand on her stomach. It's okay, you'll be such a wonderful dad, and I know you'll protect us. We're ready to meet you soon, aren't we? In a few months, we were expecting a new addition to our family. Kneeling beside Mia, I spoke to the child growing inside her. There would be tough times ahead, moments that would make us want to cry, but as long as we were together, we'd get through anything. All right, let's go. Dad and everyone else are waiting for us. Yes. Mia took my hand and stood up from her chair. Together, we started walking down the hallway that led to the ceremony. Eric. I'm so happy. I am too, Mia. We smiled at each other, filled with joy, knowing that tomorrow, the next day, and every day after would be just as bright. Life is full of both good and bad moments. Just when you think everything's going smoothly, you can suddenly be plunged into the depths. And when you feel like it's all over, sometimes an unexpected hand reaches out to lift you back up. It's the unpredictability that makes life interesting. Even if it doesn't go well for today, just give a chance for tomorrow. Because, as it was for me, even bitter memories can one day become cherished treasures. Help, my mom collapsed. She looks like she's in pain. On my day off, I answered the phone and heard the sobbing voice of Hannah, the daughter of my senior colleague, Sarah. Hang on. I'm coming right now. I rushed to Sarah's house as fast as I could. I approached Sarah, calling out to her, but there was no response. Unable to bear it any longer, I called an ambulance. It's going to be okay. We'll be at the hospital soon. I held Hannah's small, trembling hand, which felt cold. My name is Chris. I'm 31 years old, working as a salesman at Rivertech Industrial Parts, a company that deals in machinery components. I've always been known for being serious, never shying away from hard work. But the reality is that I haven't been able to achieve any big sales as a salesman. Sometimes I get discouraged, wondering if hard work alone isn't enough, but I push through, refusing to give up. One big reason for that is Sarah, my senior colleague. She's 33, 2 years older than me. Sarah is a calm and highly skilled salesperson, trusted deeply by her clients. Seeing her in action using various techniques and handling clients with grace, I grew to admire and respect her deeply. The time I get to chat with Sarah during breaks has become something special to me. She's always calm and handles even the most difficult customers with ease. She's truly an amazing mentor. Before I knew it, my feelings for Sarah had evolved into something more than just respect. But she's married. So, to me, she can only be someone I admire from afar. Even if my feelings were to grow beyond that, they would never be returned. I'm okay with just being by her side, even if it's only at work. That's enough for me. Still, at the very least, I want to improve at work and get closer to her level. I've been working tirelessly to better myself. I don't mind staying late, actively working to boost my sales, always striving to do better. Seeing my effort, Sarah smiled and said, "Chris, you've been working really hard lately. I should learn from you." "No, it's me who should be learning from you, Sarah. Your work is what I aspire to." "Thank you." What I always try to focus on is making sure the clients enjoy working with us. If they do, they'll want to come back to us again. I see. If you keep that in mind, I believe you can win over any client. Her strong sense of purpose in her work always dazzled me. I felt proud to know someone like her. One day, Sarah asked me, "Chris, with all this overtime, don't you have trouble finding time to go on dates?" "You don't have to worry about that. I don't have a girlfriend." "Oh. I see." She looked a little awkward, so I added, "Well, I'm pretty much just a boring guy who's only good at being serious." Being serious, that's really important. It shows in how you approach work too. One day, someone will appreciate your seriousness. You think so? Yeah. If you ask me, being serious is the best quality in a husband. It wasn't until later that I understood what Sarah really meant when she said that being serious was the best. Over time, Sarah and I started talking about personal things. Our conversations grew more intimate, and I even felt like we were getting closer. "Sarah, you're married, so it must be tough juggling work and everything else, right?" "Chris, I'm a single mother." "What?" I was shocked. I had always assumed Sarah was living a happy married life, but to find out she had been through a divorce. Yet, despite everything, she carried on at work like always. That's why I couldn't even notice how much Sarah had been struggling. I felt ashamed of myself for not realizing. Suddenly, the emotions I'd been holding back seemed to burst out all at once. Sarah spoke to me, saying, "My daughter's name is Hannah. She's 9 years old now. I know I'm her mom, but she's really bright for her age. Just seeing her smile makes me feel like I can keep going every day. Hannah is the reason I can keep pushing forward." Her face, radiating the strength and tenderness of a mother, looked so beautiful. I found myself even more captivated by Sarah. That's why I was so determined to succeed at work and produce results as quickly as possible. I actively emulated Sarah's methods, absorbing every bit of sales knowledge I could. I started to think that once I achieved some real success, I'd finally be able to confess my feelings to her. My feelings grew stronger each day, swelling more and more. It got to the point where I could barely handle them myself. One day, with a slightly clouded expression, Sarah confided in me. "I only got divorced recently. It's tough being a single mom. Although Sarah clearly had personal struggles, she never let them show at work. She never mixed her personal life with her job. Despite the difficulties she was facing, she kept giving her all. I found myself wondering if I should step further into her personal life. Then one day, Sarah handed me a book, saying, "Chris, you should read this. It really helped me with my sales. And I'm sure you'll find it useful too." With that, she passed me the book. "Thank you. I'll borrow it." That night, I stayed up reading it. I read it over and over, determined to make sure I fully understood it, vowing to apply it to my work. Just as Sarah had said, the techniques in the book were invaluable for my future in sales. I immediately put the techniques from the book into practice without hesitation. As a result, I started to see my efforts pay off, with my performance gradually improving. My relationships with clients improved, and my sales performance started to rise. One day, I decided to return the book to Sarah at her home. I called her, saying, "Thank you so much for the book the other day. Thanks to you, my sales numbers are going up. I'd like to return the book now. You can just bring it to the office." She said, but I couldn't let it go. I bought a cake from a newly opened shop that had great reviews and headed to her house. Sarah's house wasn't too far from my apartment. It was about a 15-minute walk. As I walked, lost in thought, I soon arrived at Sarah's home. I felt a bit nervous, but I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Finally, I pressed the doorbell. "Yes? Who is it?" A sweet, cheerful voice answered. It was Hannah, Sarah's daughter, answering in her place. "I'm Chris from Sarah's office." "Mom, it's Chris." "Thank you, Hannah," I heard Sarah say through the door, and I couldn't help but smile. A moment later, the door opened. "Chris, thank you for going out of your way," Sarah said, welcoming me with a smile. Hannah peeked out from behind her. She looked just like her mom. "Nice to meet you, Hannah. I'm Chris. Thank you for always taking care of my mom." I can see why Sarah said she is so smart. Even though she's only 9, I thought, she's such a confident and articulate kid. I'm the one who's grateful for all the help. When I said that, Hannah looked at Sarah and tilted her head with a smile, as if to say, "I told you so." The other day, she lent me a book. "Sarah, please enjoy this with Hannah." As I said that, I handed a box of cake to Sarah. "Thank you. This is from that new cake shop, right?" "Yes. Hannah and I were just saying we wanted to try it sometime." "Great. Thanks so much, Chris." I watched the two of them with a smile. I suddenly wondered, I hope Hannah's first impression of me was okay. But when I saw Hannah waving and saying, "Bye, Chris. Take good care of my mom, okay?" I felt relieved. "Bye, Hannah." I could feel the distance between Sarah and me getting closer, and it made my heart race. Talking to Sarah after work and our chats during breaks were becoming something I really looked forward to. "Chris, that cake was so good. Hannah loved it and told me to thank you. I'm so glad she enjoyed it. She looked so happy, I wish you could have seen her cheeks practically bursting with joy." Seeing Sarah's happy face made me feel happy, too. "Let's keep doing our best together," she said with a smile. I found myself even more drawn to Sarah, feeling my feelings for her growing stronger by the day. But I could tell that she was struggling to balance work and family. I was starting to really want to support Sarah, a single mom, with all my heart. Every time I saw that tired smile of hers, it looked like she was holding back tears. And each time, I thought, "Sarah, you don't have to push yourself so hard. It's okay to cry when things are tough. Cry if it helps you smile again tomorrow." These feelings were always locked inside my heart. But I genuinely wanted to protect that smile of hers. At the same time, I felt a strong desire to support not just her work but her life, too. One weekend, I got a call from Sarah. "What? Sarah's calling me on her day off. I wonder what's going on. Feeling confused, I quickly answered the phone. Hello, it's Chris. Help. Mom collapsed. She looks like she's in pain. It was her daughter, Hannah, on the phone. What? I could hear her sobbing on the other end. Hannah, wait. I'm coming right now. Grabbing only my wallet and phone, I rushed to Sarah's house. After ringing the doorbell, a tearful Hannah opened the door. Chris, my mom is. I rushed inside and found Sarah unconscious. Sarah. I called her name, but she was unresponsive. Thankfully, she was still breathing. I immediately called for an ambulance and did my best to help by placing her in a recovery position. Before long, the ambulance arrived, and I got in with Hannah. Her face was filled with worry. No matter how mature she seems, she's still just 9 years old. Her only parent had collapsed, and she must have been terrified and overwhelmed with fear. I gently held her hand and said, Hannah, it's going to be okay. We're almost at the hospital. Her small hand was cold and trembling. Once Sarah was taken to the hospital, her condition stabilized, and it turned out not to be too serious. Hannah, your mom's going to be okay. Isn't that great? Yeah. Hannah had stopped crying. Relieved, I sat with her in the hospital room, watching over Sarah as she rested. The whole time, Hannah never let go of my hand. Where am I? Sarah woke up, looking around in confusion. You're in the hospital. You collapsed at home. Hannah called me, and I came over and called an ambulance. Hannah did? Yes. Mom collapsed, so I used your phone to call Chris. I'm so glad you're awake, Mom. Hannah, you're so brave. Thank you, and I'm sorry for worrying you, Sarah said, stroking Hannah's head. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, turning to me, she said in a trembling voice, Thank you, Chris. The doctor said it was caused by exhaustion and stress. What happened? If you're comfortable, I'd like to help in any way I can. After thinking for a moment, Sarah slowly began to speak. You know I told you I'm divorced, right? Well, my ex-husband secretly made me a cosigner on his loans and then disappeared with the debt. I've been struggling to pay it off ever since, and it's made life incredibly hard each month. I tried reaching out to his family and friends, but no one knows where he is. I've been at a complete loss. But I had to keep going for Hannah's sake. That's why I've always believed being serious was the most important thing, because I watched how irresponsible my ex was. Sarah. Hearing how difficult her life had been, hit me hard. I realized how much she had been enduring all this time while working so hard. My ex was addicted to gambling. Any money he earned, he blew it all instead of supporting us. The debt just kept piling up. Eventually, he even tried to take the money I'd saved for household expenses. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen. I couldn't bring myself to divorce him, though, because he's Hannah's father. But one day, Hannah said to me, Mom, I don't have a dad. He never plays with me, and when I see him, he just yells at me. I only want to be with you, Mom. Just the two of us, please. Please, divorce him. That gave me the courage to finally leave him. But I never thought I'd still be haunted by him after the divorce. As Sarah recounted the awful details of her ex-husband's behavior, I felt a wave of anger rise up inside me. Thinking about how Hannah must have felt when she said those words to her mom filled me with sorrow. I looked at Sarah and said, Sarah, is there any way I can help you outside of work? But she drew a line, saying, I don't want to trouble you any more than I already have, Chris. At that moment, I remembered Hannah's small hand. She was so worried about her mother that her hand was cold and trembling. That's why I truly wanted to help both Sarah and Hannah. I felt a deep ache in my heart. But I resolved that I wouldn't give up. One day, Sarah said to me, Chris, I want to thank you for everything you've done. If you're free, could you come over this weekend? Hannah really wants to thank you too. Her unexpected invitation filled me with excitement. I never imagined I'd have this kind of opportunity. I'm sure it was Hannah who made this happen. I felt genuinely grateful to her. On the weekend, when I rang the doorbell at Sarah's house, a cute voice responded, "Coming." Hannah opened the door and said, "Chris, thank you so much for the other day. Come on in," and she took my hand with her small one, guiding me inside. "Mom's cooking right now, so just wait a bit, okay?" "Sure. I made you a letter and a drawing, Chris. Here you go." Hannah handed them to me. The letter was in a cute envelope, and on the front, in her handwriting, it said, "To Chris." I could tell she must have worked really hard on it. Hannah, looking a bit shy, said, "Read it when you get home, okay?" The drawing she gave me had her in the middle, holding hands with me and Sarah. "Hannah, you're really good." When I complimented her, she beamed with joy. Just then, "Chris, welcome. Thank you again for everything the other day. I was thinking we could go out to a restaurant, but I'm sorry. I hope this will do instead. Please, eat as much as you like." The table was filled with freshly cooked dishes. As I enjoyed the meal, I said, "Sarah, this is really delicious," savoring her homemade food. I once again asked Sarah, "Please let me know if there's anything I can help with." But she firmly replied, "We're just co-workers. I really appreciate everything you did, but this and that are different matters." Despite her gratitude, Sarah was determined to maintain some distance between us. Meanwhile, Hannah had grown attached to me and even started saying, "Chris, you're like a dad." Her words caught me off guard. Every time I thought about Hannah, I remembered her small and trembling hand. I truly wanted to protect and support that little hand. When I got home, I immediately opened Hannah's letter. "Dear Chris, thank you for coming when my mom collapsed. Thank you for holding my hand all the way to the hospital. I'm really glad you were there. Chris, because you came so quickly, my mom was saved. Please keep taking care of her from now on." It looked like she had just learned some spellings, as the word for hospital seemed a bit difficult for her to write. But her feelings shone through in every word. I found myself reading the letter over and over again. But the words started to blur. I realized I was crying. "Hannah, thank you for such a beautiful letter," I whispered. At that moment, I made a renewed vow to help both of them. Even if my feelings went unreturned, it didn't matter. I just wanted to help them, because I wanted them to keep smiling, always. Around that time, my boss, Tyler, began plotting against Sarah out of jealousy for her success. She's just a divorced woman, and yet she keeps landing all these contracts. I heard from a private investigator that she's stuck with her ex-husband's debt. No way am I going to let her keep doing whatever she wants. Just wait and see. They said. Tyler gave a sly smile as he said that. This was later revealed by a senior member of the sales team who had been under his command. Tyler began spreading malicious rumors by exploiting Sarah's personal issues. "Have you heard about Sarah?" "Yeah, I heard she's got a huge debt. They say that's why she's using her charms to close deals." I didn't think she was like that. Kind of disappointing. Right? I used to look up to her as a strong career woman. Maybe that's why her marriage fell apart. Her husband couldn't handle it. Yeah, I wouldn't want a wife like that either. The sales team was full of whispers. Gossip, once started, tends to snowball and head in all the wrong directions. Did you hear? That recent contract was originally Tyler's, but the client requested Sarah instead. Apparently, she used her charm to win him over. Is it really worth going that far just to land a contract? Well, she's divorced and in debt, so maybe she needs to do that to survive. It's awful, isn't it? Maybe being divorced has made her desperate. The rumors were relentless. Of course, this eventually reached Sarah. "Sarah, don't pay attention to those rumors." "Thank you, Chris," she said weakly. She was becoming increasingly isolated at work. The stress weighed heavily on her. Though she maintained a calm facade, I could tell she was nearing her breaking point. Knowing she had collapsed before, I was constantly worried about her. I vowed to protect both Sarah and Hannah, and I became even more cautious of Tyler's schemes. I decided to gather evidence to expose Tyler's plot to bring Sarah down. But his schemes were clever, and finding solid proof wasn't easy, with little progress to show for my efforts. There's got to be evidence somewhere. I won't give up until I find it. Amidst all this, Hannah suddenly showed up at my office, catching me off guard. "Hannah, what are you doing here? Mom hasn't been herself lately. She seems really troubled. She's been talking in her sleep, saying things like, 'It wasn't me who took out the loan.' Why won't anyone believe me? I think someone at work is saying that about her." So I came to explain. I don't want her to suffer anymore because of that awful person. I understand how you feel, Hannah, but I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? If you speak up, people might say your mom is using you, and that could hurt her even more. But what should I do then? Her pure-hearted concern moved me deeply. The truth is, I was raised by a single parent too. There was no way I could stand by and leave Hannah, also being raised by just one parent, without doing something. "Hannah, I have an idea." "What is it?" "You love your mom, right?" "Yeah. I love her so much." Hannah said this with a big, carefree smile. "How about we work together to protect your mom?" "With you, Chris?" "Yes, with me. But this has to be our secret." "Do you think you can keep it?" "Yeah. I can keep the promise with you." And so, Hannah and I formed a secret alliance. I started thinking of ways to support Sarah more effectively. I threw myself into my work even harder and began to consistently improve my sales performance. Man, Chris has been on fire lately. He used to rank below me, but now he's totally surpassed me, and I can't even catch up. Right? He was always serious, but his numbers were never that great. I guess all that dedication is finally paying off. My efforts started gaining attention within the company, and my reputation grew. At the same time, I discreetly reached out to Tyler's clients. I was trying to catch any sign of his wrongdoing. Eventually, I discovered that Tyler had been involved in shady deals with one of his clients, Matthew. I began monitoring Tyler's actions both inside and outside the company, preparing to expose his misconduct. Meanwhile, I knew I couldn't forget to be there for Sarah, who was still feeling isolated at work. One day, I finally obtained proof that Tyler and Matthew had been inflating invoices for fraudulent claims. Armed with this critical evidence, I headed to the company's higher-ups. "Excuse me, I'm Chris from sales." "Ah, yes, we've been expecting you." "So, what's this about? Are you aware that Tyler from the sales department has been colluding with a client, Matthew, to inflate invoices and defraud the company?" I revealed Tyler's scheme to the executives. "What? Please take a look at this data. This is the undeniable proof. Call Tyler in here immediately." Tyler was summoned to the office in a hurry. "Tyler, what's the meaning of this?" "Explain yourself." The moment he saw the data, fear washed over his face. Well, this is..." He fumbled to explain, but the shock left him unable to offer any defense. To think someone in this company would stoop so low. This is a serious blow to our reputation. Do you understand the gravity of this situation? You will face severe consequences. Prepare yourself. Tyler collapsed on the spot, realizing the gravity of his downfall. News of the incident spread quickly throughout the company. "Did you hear about Tyler? Unbelievable what he did, right?" "It's true, and Tyler was just jealous of Sarah and spread all those lies about her. So we were just dancing to Tyler's tune without realizing it. We really wronged Sarah. Yeah. Tyler lost all credibility in the company and left before any formal punishment could be handed down. Sarah, I'm so sorry. We believed everything Tyler said and ended up doubting you. It's true that I have debt, but I've never used my looks to land deals. Of course, I always aim to build good relationships with clients. But that's just being professional. Sarah gave a little chuckle. Sarah, from now on, be careful not to believe rumors so easily, okay? It's disrespectful to the clients as well. We will. Thank you so much. After that incident, Sarah gradually regained her standing in the company. Chris, thank you. It's all thanks to you. Oh, I didn't really do that much. Don't be so modest. If it weren't for you, I might have had to leave the company. She said this with a fresh, relieved smile. From that moment on, I felt that our bond was growing even deeper. As I achieved success in the company, I also renewed my resolve to continue supporting both Sarah and Hannah. Sarah thanked me again by cooking a homemade meal. Hannah whispered in my ear, I'm keeping our secret, Chris. What? What are you talking about with Chris? I just thanked Chris for helping my mom. Hannah said playfully. She was becoming more attached to me, and I felt that the bond between the three of us was getting even stronger. At some point, Sarah began to realize how much I meant to her. She later told me this. We started helping each other, both in our professional lives and personally. One day, I told Sarah, I want to build a future with you and Hannah. Let's get married. Chris. That day, I realized how irreplaceable you are to me. But I'm a divorced, single mom. And yet, you still want to be with me and Hannah. Thank you. Sarah was deeply moved by my words and decided to take that step forward with me. Hannah was our little Cupid. If it weren't for her, I don't think I would have gotten this close to Sarah. Finally, I was able to hold that small hand of Hannah's. Hannah, the picture you drew has come true. I was once again filled with gratitude for her presence in my life. We had a small wedding, inviting close friends and family. Sarah hesitated since it was her second wedding, but I told her, I want to see you in a wedding dress. I want to see Mom in her dress too. And I want to wear one. And I want to see Dad in a tuxedo. Hannah. I felt such love for Hannah when she called me Dad, and I hugged her tightly. She whispered excitedly in my ear, our secret promise will keep going, Dad. The wedding was only possible because of Hannah. I thought to myself, she really is our little angel. About 6 months after the wedding, I invited Sarah and Hannah to go on a picnic. Growing up with just one parent, I had always dreamed of going on a family picnic like this. Hannah had been looking forward to it for weeks, saying, it's been so long since our last picnic. I'm so excited. I made a vow to always protect Sarah and Hannah, doing everything in my power to keep their smiles bright. Chris, you like this, don't you? You made this for me? As Sarah and I exchanged these happy words, Hannah watched us with a joyful smile. After that, Sarah and I built a relationship where we supported each other both at work and at home. I continued to achieve great results in sales, becoming her reliable right-hand man. Both Sarah and I earned promotions, and soon, people started saying, they're not just a perfect couple. They're the power couple of the sales department. The company's performance kept improving as well. I felt more motivated than ever to keep giving my best. Sometimes, people are driven to work hard, even at personal sacrifice, for the sake of someone else. I believe that's what love is. I'm incredibly happy to have shown my love to Sarah and Hannah. In return, Sarah showed me her deepest gratitude and love. And our little angel, Hannah, always gave me the brightest, most joyful smile. I vowed once again to cherish Sarah and Hannah, and to build a happy, loving family together. $300 million. It's way too much pressure. I can't handle that. The man shouted in anguish and then ran off somewhere. He is the in-house interpreter for the company I work for. On this day, we were heading to the designated meeting room for a business discussion with a major international corporation. Accompanied by the president, Mr. Armstrong, and Kevin, the head of sales. I guess he overheard Mr. Armstrong say something from the back seat. If we pull this off, a $300 million revenue boost might just be within reach. Seeing the interpreter clutch his stomach from nerves, I suggested we stop at a convenience store for a quick restroom break. But the moment he returned to the car from the store, he started crying and ran off. With a determined look, I told Mr. Armstrong and the others, who appeared deeply concerned. Please, let me handle this. This was the beginning of my story, one where I'd take on responsibilities far beyond my usual secretarial duties. My name is Brandon, and I'm currently 30 years old. I work as an executive assistant to the president at X Corporation. My job involves managing Mr. Armstrong's schedule, arranging conference rooms and personnel as needed, and assisting with anything he requires. At times, I also serve as a driver, transporting not only Mr. Armstrong but also other executives. I've gotten used to driving since I got my license, though I remember feeling pretty nervous about chauffeuring senior executives at first. I've gone on road trips with friends a few times, but there's a bit more pressure when it's the senior executives. One day, after completing a research assignment requested by Mr. Armstrong, I headed to his office. Excuse me. As I opened the door, I saw Mr. Armstrong sitting there with two other colleagues in suits. They were gathered around a central chair, talking intently, but as soon as I spoke, they all turned to look at me. Oh, Brandon. The one who said that was Kevin, the head of sales. With a relaxed tone, he greeted me with a casual wave of his hand. Ah, hello Brandon. Timothy, the company's interpreter, muttered this with a slight bow, his eyes darting around nervously. I gave a nod to everyone and began preparing coffee. Mr. Armstrong, Kevin, and Timothy were a team that Mr. Armstrong personally assembled for this important upcoming meeting. They seemed to have been discussing their plans, as this was one of many recent gatherings in the president's office. Mr. Armstrong, regarding this part of the document. Yes, it might be best to revise that section. As I poured the coffee, the soothing aroma seemed to relax the tense atmosphere a bit. I set a cup in front of each of them and took a step back to quietly observe. I'm just the president's assistant, so I'll likely never be involved in a make-or-break meeting like this. I take my responsibilities seriously, but these three must be dealing with pressure at a level far beyond mine. My life is pretty peaceful. I work during the week, and on weekends, I buy daily necessities, watch movies, or wander aimlessly around the shopping mall. I don't have a partner, but I get to enjoy my free time doing what I like, and I kind of enjoy that freedom. Sorry, I'm spending my next day off with my wife. Some of my friends have started getting married, and while I sometimes feel a bit lonely when they turn down invitations to hang out, I don't really find myself wishing I had a partner. I've been able to live a fulfilling life, appreciating the simple joy of feeling content without any major complaints. By the way, from my perspective, Kevin is someone with a gentle, easygoing demeanor. Kevin, could you please check this? Sure, it looks great. I appreciate your attention to detail as always. I've seen him interacting with his team several times, and he never loses his warm smile. It's not a forced smile, every word he says genuinely feels like it comes from the heart. The sales department he leads also seems to share a harmonious, trouble-free atmosphere. The entire team embodies that same gentle, positive vibe Kevin brings. However, he's not entirely without ambition or dedication to his work. Kevin's passion for each task is contagious, motivating his team to bring their best efforts too. I've often looked up to Kevin's work ethic since I joined this company. Each time, I'd think, I need to work harder, just like him. Given how diligent and capable he is, it's no wonder Mr. Armstrong chose to put him on this team directly. With Kevin involved, it feels like things are bound to go smoothly. Our other team member, Timothy, the interpreter, is my peer. I sat near him at our orientation, and at one point, I asked him how he ended up joining the company. When I spoke to him, he reacted with a surprised, "Ha! What's up?" which, in its own way, became a memorable first impression. Apparently, he'd been going to kids' English classes since he was very young. By the time he reached upper elementary school, he'd nearly mastered English, so he started learning other languages too. It was so exciting, watching my knowledge expand and seeing myself improve over time until I could speak fluently without stumbling. Timothy spoke those words, lowering his gaze nostalgically as if reminiscing about that moment. His interest in languages never waned, and eventually, he went to the nation's top university to study linguistics. After graduating, he worked freelance as an interpreter and in language-related roles before joining X Corporation as a full-time employee. Timothy is 29, a little younger than me. Regardless of age, I respect him just as much as I do Kevin because he's incredibly skilled. But even someone as capable as Timothy has his challenges. He's rather shy, prone to anxiety, and has trouble expressing his opinions. I've seen him a few times in discussions with Mr. Armstrong and Kevin, and when asked, "So, Timothy, what do you think?" he often turns red, looking a bit panicked. He stammers, barely able to get a word out. If he's this way around his own colleagues, dealing with unfamiliar clients during business talks must be even more challenging. Apparently, the stress sometimes causes stomach issues. He would murmur, "Excuse me, I need to go to the restroom," and end up hiding out there for about 10 minutes. For this reason, any meetings involving Timothy are scheduled with extra time as a buffer. He keeps stomach medicine on hand at all times, not just in his bag but in his suit pocket too. I've even seen the small medicine case fall out when he leans over occasionally. But his language skills are so exceptional that his nervousness pales in comparison, making him one of the company's top assets. Around the time Timothy joined, the company started handling more international consultations, and his presence gave a noticeable boost to those efforts. Of course, this is only mentioned in his absence to avoid adding to his nerves. Countless discussions took place in the president's office. Finally, the day came for our team to head out for an important business meeting. We planned to meet at the station near the company, and then I'd drive us to the location. "Hey, good morning, Brandon." "Good morning, Mr. Armstrong." Mr. Armstrong arrived 10 minutes early. Kevin joined us around the same time, and I gave them a quick nod. "Thanks for driving today, Brandon." "Yes, I will drive safely." With that, we waited for the last member, Timothy. As Mr. Armstrong and Kevin talked over the meeting, I kept glancing down at my watch. The ticking hands moved closer to the meeting time, and my heartbeat grew louder with each passing second. There was no sign of him at all. I looked around, but I couldn't spot anyone who looked like him. I quickly took out my phone and called, but all I got was the soulless beeping of an unanswered call. "Has Timothy still not shown up?" Mr. Armstrong asked, his face starting to show some concern. Could he be feeling unwell? Or did something happen on his way out of the house? Just as I began to worry about Timothy's whereabouts, I heard a breathless voice. "Sorry for the delay. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting." Timothy finally showed up, rushing in a few minutes after our meeting time. He explained that he had been hit with severe stomach pains from the nerves, and since he was running, he hadn't noticed my call. Mr. Armstrong, Kevin, and I all sighed in relief. Thank goodness. For a moment, I'd feared we were starting the day off with an unexpected incident, but it looked like we were back on track. "I'm truly sorry." As Mr. Armstrong and Kevin assured him that it was all fine, Timothy kept apologizing repeatedly, his expression heavy with guilt. Our client today was a company with a major international presence. While I kept my eyes on the road, I listened to snippets of conversation between Mr. Armstrong and Kevin, as though I were tuning into a radio show. It's hard to believe this opportunity finally came through. Yes, our persistence paid off. The voices of Mr. Armstrong and Kevin sounded as if they were savoring their joy. It seems they had been reaching out to the other party for years, and now, after much effort, they finally made it happen. Clearly, they were putting everything into this deal. The client company is a true giant in its field. Their representative was scheduled to fly back home today, but they had made time for this meeting right before departure. If this works out, that $300 million revenue goal could actually become a reality. Through the rearview mirror, I could see Mr. Armstrong's excited grin as he clenched his fist with confidence. While Kevin responded with a gentle smile, Timothy in the passenger seat went pale and began to tremble visibly. "Are you all right? Are you sure you're okay?" His shaking was so intense that I could feel it even from where I sat. No matter how hard I try, it keeps slipping into the corner of my vision. I know I should focus, but my eyes keep darting over to it involuntarily. "Yes, I'm fine." "Sorry." He says so, but it's clear he doesn't mean it. His voice and body are both trembling, and his words falter at the end. He's far more nervous now than he was during the discussion at our office. That's just how he is under pressure. A $300 million figure was weighing heavily on his shoulders. "Here, take this if it helps." At a red light, I handed him a honey candy from the stash I kept in the car. I hoped it might offer him a little comfort. "Oh, thank you." Timothy quickly tried to put it in his mouth, but his hands were trembling, and he struggled to open the wrapper. After about 5 minutes, the amber-colored candy finally entered his mouth, only highlighting his nervousness even more. The hard clinking sound of the candy against his teeth continued until it fully melted. While I was curious about the conversation between Mr. Armstrong and Kevin, my mind was mostly occupied by concern for Timothy. When I noticed him leaning forward and clutching his stomach, I decided to stop at a convenience store for a restroom break. "Sorry, I need to use the restroom." Timothy quickly got permission from the cashier before dashing into the restroom. "Do you think he'll be all right?" "He may be struggling now, but I'm sure once we're in the meeting, he'll deliver as usual." Mr. Armstrong and Kevin watched him with worry, but their conversation soon drifted back to the upcoming deal, their excitement palpable. "This is a $300 million business, the highest in our company's history. Let's hope it all goes as planned," they continued, their enthusiasm turning to optimistic projections. Caught up in their high spirits, I couldn't help but join in, getting excited along with them as we chatted away. Our voices filling the car with lively anticipation. As we continued talking for a while, Mr. Armstrong's phone buzzed, signaling an incoming call. He held it to his ear and began speaking about something, so I turned my gaze toward the convenience store entrance, waiting for Timothy to come out. Just then, right on cue, he appeared and glanced around the parking lot with a troubled look. His eyes darted in every direction, as if searching for something. Did he forget where we parked the car? I rolled down the driver's window and called out, "Timothy, over here." He snapped his head up at the sound and seemed like he would come straight to the passenger side, but instead, he muttered, oh," and began groaning. Something was definitely wrong. His body was trembling even more than before our break. Even from a slight distance, I could see his lips had lost all color. His eyes were wide, as if they might pop out of his head at any moment. As I looked on, stunned, with my mouth slightly agape, Timothy threw out a shocking statement. $300 million. It's too much for me. I can't handle a role that important. What? Wait, Timothy. But before I knew it, he was sobbing and sprinting away. Even random passers-by were caught off guard by the bizarre scene, staring at him as they passed. But Timothy paid them no mind, increasing the distance between us without slowing down. "Timothy, where are you going?" I quickly put the drink I was holding into the cup holder, threw open the door, and prepared to chase after him. Just as I stepped out, Mr. Armstrong's sharp voice called out from behind me. "Wait, Brandon. I just got a call from John, our business associate." It seemed John had requested to move up the meeting time. The destination is just up ahead. I can handle the situation, but it would mean giving up on following Timothy. But, Mr. Armstrong, what about Timothy? Usually, Kevin always wore a calm smile, but even he looked distressed now, his face tense. Mr. Armstrong pressed a hand to his forehead, his face falling. He must have been torn between not wanting to inconvenience the client who'd arranged this opportunity and his concern over Timothy. I pressed my lips together tightly, waiting for his decision. It felt like an endless silence stretched on. It was so quiet it seemed like we were the only ones left in the world, but at last, Mr. Armstrong slowly began to speak. Timothy is a grown man. He's not a helpless child. He looked upset, but he should be able to catch a ride home. And he has a phone. So we can reach him. I doubt he'll run into any real trouble. At that, Kevin interrupted urgently. But he's our interpreter for this deal, isn't he? When it comes to high-level business English, our language skills are limited. Mr. Armstrong's eyes widened, and he groaned, "Oh, that's right." Though he appeared composed, the air around him made it clear he was actually panicking inside. Should we still try to catch up with him? But if we do, then we'll be cutting it too close to the appointment time. While Mr. Armstrong and Kevin deliberated, time continued to tick away mercilessly. Noticing how fast the clock was moving toward the appointment time, Mr. Armstrong's anxiety visibly increased. A faint sheen of cold sweat was beginning to form on his forehead. Watching him like that, an idea suddenly came to me. Maybe this was my chance to repay Mr. Armstrong. The ticking second hand on my watch. The tense voices of Mr. Armstrong and Kevin. And no other solution coming to mind. I tightened my fist subtly, as if gathering my resolve. Mr. Armstrong, I have a suggestion. Both of them flinched at my voice, turning to look at me almost simultaneously. Given how Timothy looked, I doubt he'll be back anytime soon. Why don't you leave this to me? Brandon. Kevin was the first to react. Mr. Armstrong, eyes wide, stared intently at me, forgetting even to blink. I may not speak multiple languages like Timothy, but I can handle English just fine. My words made the two of them exchange glances. Mr. Armstrong briefly glanced at his watch, then nodded as if he had made up his mind. All right, I'll leave the interpreting to you. Relieved that they trusted me in this high-stakes situation, I let out a quiet thank you, feeling a weight lift from my chest. I'm worried about Timothy, but right now, we have no choice but to move forward with the meeting. Leaving the convenience store behind, we headed to the rental conference room near the airport. The clients were already there, and following Mr. Armstrong's lead, we each greeted them and exchanged handshakes. Everything moved quickly, without a moment to catch our breath. I wondered absently if waiting around for them would have made me even more nervous. The client's president was John Smith. When I shook hands with him, he held on tightly, not letting go. It felt like he held my hand far longer than he had with Mr. Armstrong or Kevin. What's going on? As I tilted my head slightly in confusion, he looked me over intently and blurted out in surprise. Are you Brandon? I've been looking for you. I finally found you. What? Both Mr. Armstrong and Kevin let out sounds of shock alongside me. I hadn't expected my name to come up here, of all places. It seemed he knew who I was, but I had no memory of him. As I glanced down, trying to search my memory, John began speaking. We met once when you were in college. There was a hint of nostalgia in his voice, and perhaps a touch of disappointment that I didn't remember. John's words took my breath away. Memories from before I started working as the executive assistant to the president flooded back like a flashback. I'd always loved studying. Or maybe it was more that I had an intense curiosity. I hated the feeling of not knowing something. Just doing the worksheets from school wasn't enough, so I'd buy extra study books myself and never missed a chance to review and prepare. That drive helped me get into Harvard University after high school. The excitement of studying specialized topics thrilled me, and I remember not being able to sleep the night before my first class. A good memory in its own way. Even after starting college, my thirst for knowledge and curiosity for learning never slowed down, and I managed to keep up good grades. One day, in a certain class, we had a group discussion. I'll be the facilitator. I volunteered right away, and since no one objected, I took the lead. The discussion went smoothly, with everyone contributing ideas, making it a productive and enjoyable experience. We even reached a solid conclusion within the time limit, leaving us all with a satisfying sense of completion. John had been watching that discussion. He had connections with people at the university and had taken the opportunity to observe students. Apparently, I had caught his eye. "Hey, do you have a moment?" After the class, he called out to me. When I turned around, I saw an unfamiliar adult standing there. Though he was smiling warmly, I remember being cautious at first, unsure of his intentions. Yes? What is it?" In response to my guarded answer, John replied enthusiastically, "Your skills are truly impressive." I was so shocked by the unexpected compliment that I froze, mouth slightly open. Then he continued, his words spilling out with excitement. "Do you know what you want to do after college?" "Huh? Even though I had left Japan to attend this university, I hadn't really figured out my future plans. I mumbled, unsure of what to say, but I couldn't lie or try to act impressive. When I admitted honestly that I hadn't decided, he responded with an exaggerated, "What? That's practically a loss for the world." That was definitely an overstatement. Not sure whether to laugh or take him seriously, I gave a faint, uncertain smile. "Then how about coming to work for us?" "Us?" John says he runs a company in the US. The business card and introduction materials he rummaged through and handed me bore the name Y Corporation. "A talent like yours would be welcome anytime." With a playful wink, he left me there, mouth agape, practically skipping away with a cheerful stride. It was such a memorable encounter, but as time passed and graduation approached, I had completely forgotten his offer. The business card, once carefully placed somewhere noticeable, had somehow slipped to the back of my drawer. My mind back then was filled with thoughts of going back to Japan. I missed my childhood home, the delicious seafood, and the safe streets. So I decided not to pursue a job in the US and returned to Japan with the Harvard degree I had worked so hard for. Looking back now, I feel a bit embarrassed, but at the time, I was quite full of myself. I thought, surely any company would want someone like me. And had a rather arrogant attitude. As it turned out, my prediction was spot on. Every company wanted someone with a Harvard degree like mine. Each time I mentioned the university's name in a job interview, I saw a shift in the interviewer's expressions. Initially uninterested, they gradually lit up, their eyes sparkling as if they'd stumbled upon a hidden treasure, and I found it amusing. I took satisfaction in feeling like I was the one choosing a company to work for, which now feels like a regrettable part of my past. Even though I received multiple job offers, I stubbornly insisted on only accepting a position that met all my conditions. So it took quite a while to find a company that fit. Once I finally started working in Japan, though, my career was far from smooth. My pride kept me from following my boss's instructions, and my resistance to their way of working left me isolated. I can't stand working with him. He never listens to instructions. He's so overconfident. Glad I didn't have to train him, it would have just been extra stress. I've come across senior employees talking about me in the empty break room more than once or twice. Naturally, none of them were positive, and it was always complaints about me. But I couldn't rein in my inflated pride and ended up blaming everyone else, thinking they just don't understand me. Of course, this led to further alienation from my colleagues, and when I clashed with my boss over a project during my second year, I impulsively quit. Still, my arrogance didn't go away. I assumed I'd find a new job quickly. I did get a few offers, but none matched the conditions of the company I just left. If only I dropped the mindset of being the one doing the choosing, I might have found a job easily, but instead, I went without work for 2 years. During that time, I received invitations to class reunions and messages from old friends asking me to go out, but I turned them all down. I was mortified by the thought of anyone laughing at me as the unemployed Harvard graduate. I'm talented, so why did things turn out like this? After being lost in these thoughts for half a year, I felt something snap in my mind, like a crack splitting through me. Maybe it was the sound of my overblown pride shattering, or maybe my mind finally reaching its limit. Suddenly, I had this idea of applying for jobs as if I only had a high school diploma, to even deceive myself. Although it took time to get hired, one company did bring me to the final interview with the president. That was X Corporation, the very company where I'd eventually work as an assistant. I had no other options left. I had to make it happen. Whatever questions they asked, I'd have to answer flawlessly. With that mindset, I went in, but I was left speechless almost immediately after the interview began. "You're not really a high school graduate, are you?" It was Mr. Armstrong who cornered me with that question right from the start. Of course, a hastily faked resume from an amateur would be exposed immediately. Regret washed over me slowly, and without a second thought, I dropped to my knees and apologized sincerely. "I'm terribly sorry." The only thought in my mind at that moment was, it's over. I couldn't imagine any scenario where I'd still be considered for the position. I was fully expecting him to tell me to leave, but instead, I heard unexpected words. "I get the feeling that you're actually a sincere, hard-working person. Perhaps so diligent that you veered off track and ended up falsifying your background. That's the impression I get from you." There was a kind tone in his voice, completely free of any judgment. Hearing that, my hardened heart softened, and I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. Then, to my shock, Mr. Armstrong smiled and told me he would forgive what I had done and hire me as his assistant. "Thank you so much." I pressed my forehead to the floor once more out of deep gratitude and vowed never to deceive others for my own selfish reasons again. And so, I began my journey as his assistant, which brings me to where I am today. Whenever I recall those days, especially my behavior during the job search, I still get chills down my arms. Yet, over time, I've come to see those experiences as essential. With John's high regard for me, the business meeting went smoothly. We even received the encouraging words, "I'd love to seriously consider this proposal." In the end, he added, "Honestly, I'd like Brandon to join our company, but if you've chosen a place, then I hope you can thrive there." His tone held a familiar blend of nostalgia and loneliness, just like before the business meeting. However, this time, it seemed to carry even more warmth. We shook hands once more, and I drove him to the airport instead of him taking a taxi. Watching him walk away, I felt a sense of closure. A few days after the meeting, Timothy still hadn't shown up at the office since his escape from the convenience store. Just when I began wondering if he would ever return, Mr. Armstrong told me, "Brandon, we managed to get in touch with Timothy." I finished up the research task Mr. Armstrong had assigned me, gathered my laptop and files, and headed to his office. "Excuse me." As usual, I stepped in with a quick greeting, only to find Mr. Armstrong holding the receiver to his ear, saying, "Yes, that's right. Come to my office right away," as he spoke on the internal line. He gestured for me to come in with a wave, so I moved forward and set my things on the central table. A few minutes later, Kevin entered the office after me. Then Timothy arrived, walking with an awkward gait. "Mr. Armstrong, what's this about?" It seemed I was the only one who knew what was about to be discussed. Kevin looked puzzled, and Timothy, his head down, was trembling slightly, clearly feeling uneasy. After looking at each of us in turn, Mr. Armstrong spoke in a solemn tone, "Brandon, please start with your report." His voice wasn't particularly loud, but it filled the room with authority. I nodded slowly and turned to Kevin. "Kevin, have you heard a certain rumor going around the company?" "Oh, rumor?" Caught off guard by my question, he blinked in surprise. As he continued with, "It's regarding a company we could call a rival, Z Corporation," his gaze drifted into the air as if searching his memory. Though, in truth, it was likely just to avoid eye contact with me. Oh, yes, I remember. There's talk that Z Corporation has been attempting to disrupt our work and poach our talent. But it's just a rumor, right? After he finished speaking in one breath, he twisted his lips into a crooked smile. It was an awkward, obviously forced expression. It was unnaturally forced, completely unlike his usual expression. I narrowed my eyes slightly. Yes, that's the one. It would be nice if it were just a rumor. Don't you think so, Timothy? I asked, glancing between Kevin and Timothy. He probably hadn't expected the conversation to suddenly shift to him. Huh? Yes. Timothy's voice broke pathetically as he responded. I sighed quietly and said, unfortunately, it's not just a rumor, as I opened my laptop and played an audio file. A familiar voice filled the room. Just before the meeting, the interpreter is set to run away. Neither I nor Mr. Armstrong can handle advanced English, so if the interpreter leaves, the deal's off. What? No way. The audio was slightly distorted, but it was definitely Kevin's voice. His face went stiff, and his mouth opened and closed silently, struggling to process the words he just heard. He reached out, perhaps to stop me from playing further, but the next words rooted him to the spot as if he'd been nailed in place. Oh, don't worry, I already promised him 30% of the payment. No one can resist money. And as for your company, when I joined Z Corporation, you did promise to give me a better deal than X Corporation, right? It was a twisted, malicious voice, a far cry from the way Kevin usually sounded. To think he'd hidden such a dark side while presenting himself as an ideal employee at X Corporation. Realizing he couldn't escape the truth any longer, both Kevin and Timothy collapsed to the floor, legs trembling like newborn fawns. When questioned, they confessed everything. With the undeniable evidence of the recording, they must have realized there was no point in hiding it any longer. Their voices and expressions conveyed resignation, and they seemed almost ready to give up. Kevin admitted that he'd planned to jump ship to Z Corporation for better treatment, with the additional reward of sabotaging X Corporation's $300 million deal. Timothy, on the other hand, had been instructed to flee right before the meeting, earning 30% of the sabotage fee for doing so. So, the trembling he'd shown at the convenience store was all an act. We're so sorry. Please, forgive us. Both of them bowed deeply, their heads almost hitting the floor as they begged for mercy. Their desperate display reminded me of my own interview with Mr. Armstrong. But the words Mr. Armstrong had for them this time were nothing like those he'd once spoken to me. This is an unforgivable betrayal of the company. His voice was cold and cutting, like a shard of ice. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, were pitch black. Watching the two of them shrink under his gaze, I felt conflicted, painfully aware that I was hardly in a position to judge anyone's lies. In the end, both Kevin and Timothy were fired. I took over the interpreter role temporarily, though I wasn't able to cover any languages other than English. To address this, I planned to work closely with HR to recruit someone new for the role. A while later, the deal with John's Y Corporation was successfully finalized. Now, to make Mr. Armstrong's goal of that $300 million a reality, I'd need to work hard to build a strong relationship of trust with John. Securing the deal was just the starting line, and the road ahead was sure to be busy. Still, I felt a sense of relief, believing I had finally repaid Mr. Armstrong. Not that he ever seemed to view his generosity toward me as a debt I needed to repay. Even if I were to mention it, he would likely tilt his head in confusion. But that's fine. This is something personal to me. I should have repaid the debt for being hired. Next, I need to start repaying the kindness shown in forgiving the lies I told. With that resolve in my heart, I headed to an important meeting with John, ready to face what lay ahead.